Ladies and gents, boys and girls, Thursday, August the 10th, 2023. Hope you're all doing well. Chris Phillips here, your host of the Daily Crow of the Spurs Up Show. Let me say I apologize for the confusion on the YouTube links. For whatever reason, we are scheduling out these shows, and then when I go into the back end and go live, for some reason, it's not going into the correct stream as it normally does. So that's why we're having to create like a separate video. I have no idea what's going on. So again, I'm not trying to play tricks on you guys or confuse you guys or anything like that. But yeah, for some reason, our back end, our studio stuff is kind of messing up. So we'll work to get that fixed. Either way, we are here. We are live. We're rocking. We have got a busy, and I mean a busy show for you all here on this Thursday. I see Brian Dean, Xavier, John Edward, Ethan K, C Youngblood, Austin Miller, GA, Rebecca, Travi, Brendan M. What is going on? Also, those in the Big Cock Club Discord, head over to the TDC Questions channel, to be sure that your questions are answered there. Again, thank you all so much for tuning in. Nobody is late, Slapdick. We went live at noon, Slapdick. Thank goodness our resident Slapdick, Brendan M., is in the chat. Mr. E3991, who's new to the Discord, says, what are the topics of discussion for the TDC today? Of course, my friend, we'll get into it. Hour number 3. We've got our Q&A Power Hour, taking your questions, comments, calls at 843-790-3377. You can call us right now, leave a voicemail. You can also text that number as well, or you can leave your questions, your comments, what have you, via YouTube. We'll get into all that in hour number 3. Hour number 2, hey, we're double dipping today via the guests. I told you all J.C. Sherbert had to change things around due to some technical issues, due to travel, what have you. So here's how we're rocking today. At 1:15, we've got my good friend Mark Ryan of the Fan Upstate. He will join the show in his regularly scheduled time. At 1:45, J.C. Sherbert of the Big Spur will join us. We'll talk all things recruiting, fall camp, maybe some NIL, what have you. Going to be a good time. So again, guys, we're double dipping with the guests. Very, very excited to talk to both of them. And then, of course, in our first hour, we continue along with the position unit preview series. On today's show, we begin talking Gamecocks defensive line and the defensive linemen heading into the 2023 football season. Looking forward to discussing everything with you all. Some of the, well, I'll tell you this. I get a lot of crap for not getting to the TDC Questions channel quicker. One of the reasons I don't is because of Brendan M's slapdickery. It kind of throws me off. So, Brendan, pipe down, slapdick. Let's have a Thursday. Either way, again, guys, appreciate each and every single one of you. Keep leaving your questions. I see Brian Dean also. Again, thank you so much. Who's RB1 going into game 1? It is DeCarrion Joyner. I think it's safe to say that is the case. Like I said, guys, jam-packed show. Lot to get into as we sit now, just 23 days away until toe meets leather. Also want to say thank you to JC, JB, and Phil inside the Gamecocks for having us on the show this morning. Really enjoyed our conversation. And as I told them, I'll tell you all as well, we're definitely, I think we're at the point. I was going to say we're getting to the point, but we're somewhat at the point where, like, I'm still obviously excited to talk these position unit previews and get into the nitty-gritty and talk ball. It's a lot of fun, right? I really do look forward to it. And we start talking defense in regards to position unit previews on today's show. But we're definitely at a point to where I think we're all exhausted with talking season, right? Like, we are just, I am so ready to just see real football on the field of play. Like, I cannot wait to see these teams actually get on the field. We have all these questions. We're making these predictions. There's all these storylines. I'm excited to start learning some things and getting some answers to our questions. Of course, it starts in week 0, Vandy, Hawaii. Then you go to week number 1. We got Florida, Utah. We got Mizzou kicking off on that Thursday. And then the entire SEC slate of games, the Gamecocks and UNC, LSU, Florida State. We got Clemson, Duke on Monday night. So very soon, folks. But you get to about 20 days, and it's like the days start to get a little bit longer, a little bit longer, and a little bit longer. And it's like, when are we ever going to get kickoff? But not to fret. It is just around the corner. Also, by the way, NFL tonight. Thank you, Cox by One, for reminding me. We do have the NFL tonight preseason. The first full weekend of the preseason does get underway. I'm not exactly sure what the games are, but I do know there are 2 games tonight. We do have NFL. You see where my brain's at right now? You see where my brain's been? We do have NFL preseason tonight with 2 games, of course, all weekend long, Friday, Saturday. I was even thinking about maybe the Panthers game Saturday, maybe traveling up to Charlotte, but I don't know that I will. Either way, though, lots of football on TV this weekend. Finally, it may not be the real thing, but damn it, it's good enough, right? Either way, guys, let's get into, again, Q&A Power Hour, hour number 3. We have 2 guests in our second hour. Tons to get into in this show. So without further ado, let's do so. A group that's similar to the offensive line, right? We've been talking all these question marks for Carolina going in the season. The Gamecocks defensive line is where we begin as we turn our attention now in the position unit preview series to the defensive side of the football, and Clayton White's unit, top storylines for the Gamecocks defensive line entering the 2023 season. And yes, folks, this includes edge players, interior defensive tackle guys. I group all of these together for the sake of the conversation and the content. And as you look at South Carolina's defensive front, there are a ton of numbers and a ton of trends that support that this group has a lot to prove in 2023. More on that later in the show. But when you look at the defensive front and the top storylines and the top things that we're keeping an eye on and talk about, you have to first start with the return of an all-time great. Travian Robertson taking over as the Gamecocks defensive line coach after stints at Tulane, Georgia State. And you look at his last stint, again, Tulane, they were a 10-win football team last year. A very good football team. And Travian Robertson, a friend of the show, somebody we had on the show back in 2019. And he even mentioned at that point how much he would love to return to South Carolina in some capacity, obviously being an assistant coach. Well, now is that time. And the opportunity has presented itself. And, you know, I want to be very careful, by the way, because obviously thoughts and prayers go out to Jimmy Lindsey, his family, what they're going through. In case you guys missed it, of course, he was rushed off the field via ambulance, some things with his health. He has taken a leave from the football team at LSU. So, again, thoughts and prayers go out to Jimmy Lindsey and his family and everything they're going through, and hopefully he's going to be okay. When you look at the football side of things and the first 2 years of the Shane Beamer era, stopping the run has really, truly been the Achilles heel of this football team and of this defense specifically. And I'll never forget the conversations I had with the late, great Brad Lowing when we talked, you know, the secondary and the pass defense and how good they had been through the first 2 seasons of Shane Beamer. And Brad Lowing looked at me and said, Chris, as a defensive coach, you should never brag about your pass defense. Because all you're telling teams is that you can't stop the run. And that's been the case for South Carolina. You look back specifically to last year, 198 yards per game. Just not going to get the job done in the SEC. What new attitude does a guy like Travian Robertson bring to this defensive front? Someone who was on the best defensive lines in school history. Travian Robertson knows what it looks like to go to an SEC championship game and what those defensive fronts do. What are the characteristics? What are the traits of a great defensive front? That tenacity, that edge, that swagger, that dominance that the Gamecocks had in the trenches when they had the likes of Kelsey Quarles and, of course, Travian and Jadeveon Clowney and Devin Taylor and Cliff Matthews and Aldrick Fordham, and the list just goes on and on and on of these fantastic players. Travian Robertson, when hired, even if he didn't go to South Carolina, guys, I would have told you he's one of the rising stars in the assistant coaching ranks. I think there's a lot of reason to have optimism and hope that he is going to be the answer for South Carolina. Very intrigued to see what he does in his first year as Gamecocks defensive line coach. South Carolina's defensive tackles specifically were praised by Shane Beamer and lauded as the best position group, not just on the defense, but on South Carolina's football team entering the 2022 season. As we all know, the Gamecocks, 198 yards per game surrendered. And when you think about that, and just how did that happen? With the talent you had up front, Zach Pickens, Tonka Hemingway, Alex Huntley, Barrett Sanders, the list goes on and on. Can these defensive tackles finally live up to their lofty billing? I don't think Shane Beamer just totally missed the mark. I think he looks at this room and says, there's talent. There are guys in here we feel very, very confident about. And I realized that I jumped into the show without giving you all a full breakdown of just who is in this room, both at defensive tackle and edge. So let me go through these names really quickly before we go any further. Tonka Hemingway, Alex Huntley, Nick Barrett, Elijah Davis, TJ Sanders, Felix Hickson, DeAndre Martin, Jamal Weiss, Xavier McLeod. Those are all of your interior players. On the edge, Jordan Strawn, Terrell Dawkins, Tyreek Johnson, Jatius Gear, Brian Thomas Jr., and Desmond Umeazulu. So you hear me list off some of those names. You add Elijah Davis to the mix, but Nick Sanders, TJ Barrett, or Nick Barrett, TJ Sanders, get my names mixed up here. They are back. Huntley and Hemingway leading the way. A group that was praised by Shane Beamer as the strength of the football team. Can they actually live up to that this year? Because if your interior defensive line is your strength, in my opinion, there's no excuse to give up 198 rushing yards per game. There's simply put, just no excuse. So there were lofty expectations placed on them a season ago. They did not live up to it. Can they do that this season? Guys, I mentioned Elijah Davis. And while we don't draw conclusions from a spring game, certainly Davis was a guy who burst on the scene and was one of the top-ranked players from the JUCO ranks. Is he ready to burst on the scene and be an impact player and immediate contributor for South Carolina? You know, this is a guy, again, very highly regarded out of junior college. And you look at a South Carolina defensive front that's looking for answers in regards to depth. Depth is a concern, no doubt, both offensively and now defensively. What he brings in size, he also has in athleticism. He displayed that in the spring game. Can he be a guy in the interior who emerges as a run stopper for you and an athletic defensive tackle as well, right? We've seen those before. Again, my mind specifically goes to a guy like Kelsey Quarles. Yes, he was a run stopper, but he was also very athletic and was able to get to the quarterback. I mean, Tonka Hemingway is another, a guy who's athletic enough to even play the edge if you need him to. Can Elijah Davis emerge and provide that depth that South Carolina so desperately needs up front? Jordan Strawn's return from injury to lead the edge position is certainly something we have all eyes on entering the 2023 football season. And we talk so much about the numbers, 198 yards per game last year, and the way South Carolina struggled in stopping the run. To be fair, you have to factor in the fact that Jordan Strawn, Mo Kaba, two of your best defensive players went down with injury in week 2 of the 2022 season. And that was a major blow for South Carolina defensively. Now Jordan Strawn returns. And you might recall, this is a guy going into last year, excuse me, that I think most of us felt really confident in, could and would lead South Carolina in sacks. Of course, you had Jordan Birch returning opposite of him, but it was Strawn we all looked to and said, this guy, he's got the makeup. He's got the build. He's got the potential. And you look at what he did at Georgia State in 2020, guys, It makes sense. Led the FBS, led college football in sacks in that 2020 season. And you even look at last year, his start to 2022. 10 total tackles, had a sack already. That was through a game and a half, if that. If Jordan Strachan can be 110%, and we expect him to be so, he is a guy that certainly can lead this defensive front for South Carolina. Coming back from the injury, but coming back from an ACL tear. Is he a step slow? Is he the same guy? Again, if he is, he's going to be a leader for the Gamecocks defensive front, undoubtedly. We've talked a lot in these position unit previews about the transfer portal, the way the portal somewhat ravaged South Carolina, who the Gamecocks were able to go out and pick up. The defensive front was no exception, losing Jordan Birch to Oregon and Gilbert Edmond to Florida State. Both of your starting edge players, or at least two of your top three guys, would have been entering 2023. Jatius Gear is a name you picked up out of Syracuse. And my question now is this. Can he not only fill the shoes of a departed Jordan Birch, can he be an upgrade? You know, Jordan Birch, the guy I talked about last year, I caught a ton of heat for simply putting expectations on Jordan Birch. Saying, hey, if he doesn't pan out this year, some out there will label him as a bust. And ironically enough, after getting some very interesting feedback on that take, let me just say that, Jordan Birch goes out, has a solid season. Give him praise. I give him credit. As soon as he hits the portal, what is a large portion of Gamecock Nation saying? That guy's a bust. He's a bust, man. He was a bust. Was he a bust? That's up for you to decide. The question I want answered more than anything is, how does Jatius Gear now fill in? A guy that from the state of South Carolina went to Syracuse, probably won the old staff, let get away, had 3.5 sacks last year for the Orange. Transitioning over from the ACC to the SEC, it is somewhat of a transition, but a guy, I think this could be a 7 or 8 sack kind of dude. I think Jatius Gear is a guy that you look at the athleticism, what he did at Cuse against solid competition. I know we love to talk down in the ACC and, you know, what they are as a conference, but against solid competition was very good. Can he step up and be that dude and fill in that void, if you will, that the Gamecocks had or now have at the edge position? Edge, we know, is a concern when it comes to numbers. It's a concern when it comes to returning production from a season ago. But picking up Gear from Syracuse, can he not only fill in the shoes of the departed Jordan Birch and Gilbert Edmond, can he be an upgrade over those two players? You continue to talk about the edge position. You talk some young guys. Youngsters stepping up. Shane Beamer mentioned, hey, we're going to have freshmen playing at every position. Defensive line's going to be no different. Desmond Umeozulu, Xavier McLeod, those are two of your big-time guys you signed. Umeozulu back in the spring making waves, making noise. Can they make a big-time impact for you? Can you get some of this freshman presence up front, some new blood in there, equating to new results, just like we talked about with the offensive line? You've brought in some real athletes, some real dudes, and you're recruiting that way as well on the recruiting trail. What is South Carolina able to get out of their youngsters in Umeozulu and McLeod? Guys, you go back to the spring game, and again, like I mentioned previously, don't draw conclusions, but Brian Thomas Jr. was flying all over the field. Can he build off of a big spring game? Or was that just a flash in the pan? Is he a spring game star or a real contributor in the fall? And also, too, guys, again, we know about Jordan Strachan. We know about Jatius Gear. We know about Desmond Umeozulu. Who else? Are there other guys in that room that can step up? I mean, you look at a guy like a Terrell Dawkins, the former NC State transfer. You look at a guy like a Tyreek Johnson. These are guys that need to take the next step. There's a lot of dudes on this defensive front that we've been hearing about for years. Hey, Nick Sanders, TJ Barrett, Terrell Dawkins, Tyreek Johnson. And I realize, by the way, I keep butchering the names of Nick Barrett and TJ Sanders. Some reason I'm backwards on those guys. Either way, you got a lot of names in this room that have talent, that have potential. They've just never really lived up to it. So I look at a guy like a Brian Thomas Jr. I look at a guy like a Terrell Dawkins. I look at a guy like a Tyreek Johnson. Heard a lot of buzz about. We've just never seen it on the field. And finally, guys, when I look at this group, mention the numbers that support that it's been a struggle over the last couple of years. And it's something where, you know, I know people get tired of hearing it, but you have to mention it until it changes. The run-stopping woes and Travian Robertson's priority number one. Because getting after the quarterback is important, no doubt, especially you look at that front half of the schedule. Drake May, Carson Beck, Will Rogers, Joe Milton, a bunch of quarterbacks that if you're not able to rush the passer, they're going to pick you apart. Bottom line, especially with the weapons they have on the outside. But stopping the run, that has been the Achilles heel of this defense over the first two seasons. They've been abysmal. And it goes even beyond that. 5 straight seasons, guys. The Gamecocks have finished 11th or worse in the SEC in rushing defense. 11th or worse. I mean, they've been abysmal. Not even average, abysmal against the run. 198 yards per game surrendered last year. That's just not going to get it done. I know South Carolina won 8 games. I know they won 7 in year 1. I know they've been able to cheat death, but you won't be able to do that forever. You won't be able to finish outside of the top 100 in rushing defense and win 8 games. You won't be able to do that every single year. For South Carolina to take the next step as a program, they've got to fix the defensive front. They've got to make improvements in the rushing defense. 2017, the last time the Gamecocks finished 10th or better in rush defense. Getting after the quarterback's important. You need Jordan Strawn, Gear, others off the edge to be at their best. Stopping the run is the big question for this group. And the hope is that with Travian Robertson, with new blood coaching this unit, that maybe, just maybe, different results will follow as well. Guys, we're going to jump into a quick break. On the other side, we're going to keep the conversation rolling here on this Thursday, August the 10th, 2023. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is brought to you by our friends at Carolina Cigars. Carolina Cigars has been in operation since 2008, recently taken over by the Peterson family in 2020. Whether you're new to the cigar scene or whether you've been enjoying cigars your entire life, Carolina Cigars has the expertise and knowledge to make your visit to their shop enjoyable. Stop by for a fine cigar and experience their classic cigar lounge where people come together, share conversations, and become friends. So if you're into cigars and you're on Hilton Head Island, you really do need to go by and see them. They offer same-day shipping nationwide, free delivery island-wide for weddings and all special occasions. They're also proud to offer premium cigars at 9 outside humidor locations around Hilton Head Island, and they have special events throughout the year as well. They want to talk to you. They want to engage. They want to share with you their cigar selection they're very proud of and their beautiful cigar lounge. When you're in the Low Country, there's only one place for cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, and there's only one place I get my cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, Hilton Head Island's premier cigar merchant. Come and share your passion. It's all here at Carolina Cigars. Give them a follow on Instagram at Carolina_cigars, or give them a call today at 843-681-8600. That's 843-681-8600. Smoke them if you got them, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya. The Daily Crow is also sponsored by Rhine Law Firm, LLC, principally managed by James R. Rhine Jr., located at 1350 Ashley River Road, Suite 650, Charleston, South Carolina, 29407, serving the greater Charleston area.
Muscle Dougie, ho.
All right, guys, we're back here on this Thursday, August the 10th, 2023. Going to appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Q&A Power Hour upcoming in hour number 3. In hour number 2, we have Mark Ryan of the Fan Upstate as well as JC Sherbert of the Big Spur. We are jam-packed, doubling up on the guests today. And, of course, in this first hour, we continue along with our conversation talking Gamecocks defensive front entering the 2023 football season. Which Gamecocks defensive lineman has the most to prove this season? There are a number of players you can look at across this group and label as the most to prove. You know, I could first start with a guy like Tonka Hemingway, who was really good a season ago, but can he take that next step and be truly one of the elite defensive tackles in the SEC? How about a guy supporting cast, Alex Huntley, who I think has been solid during his time in Columbia, but I don't know if he's been that impact guy we all expected. How about Jordan Strawn returning from injury, living up to the lofty billing of being the lead sack guy? How about Elijah Davis, Brian Thomas Jr.? I mean, the list goes on and on. And when you lose 6 of your top 8, in your front seven in regards to snap count, when you lose 3 of your top players in Zach Pickens, Jordan Birch, and Gilbert Edmond off of a group that surrendered 198 yards per game on the ground a season ago and didn't do all that great of a job of rushing the quarterback, there's a ton to prove for every single player in this room. But there is one guy specifically that I look to. And it's all about finding ways to win in the transfer portal. You know, offensively, it was the tight end position. Is South Carolina able to win the breakup? They picked up Trey Knox and Joshua Simon to replace Jaheim Bell. Well, that version of that on the defensive side is the pickup of Jatius Gear to replace the void left by Jordan Birch and Gilbert Edmond departing. Jatius Gear, a guy coming over from Syracuse, 29 tackles a season ago, 3.5 sacks, and 1 forced fumble. Here's some perspective for you all. Gear had 3.5 sacks in 2022. Jordan Birch had 3.5 sacks in its entire South Carolina career. I present that information to you only to give you context. What you do with that information is up to you. But a guy in Gear who you're leaning on to slide in and be an immediate contributor, a day one starter, a threat off the edge. You're only as good as your pass rush in the SEC. You're only as good as your front 4, your front 7, stopping the run, getting after the quarterback in the SEC. If you don't have that, it's going to be a struggle defensively. And we've talked about the importance of this year for Clayton White, getting the defense going, right? Showing improvement in year 3. A lot of that will have to do with your edge guys, your pass rush, and getting after the quarterback. Jatius Gear's a dude, you look at him, he's got the size, he's got the athleticism. I mean, when you're building an offensive lineman, when you think about what you want in a guy in your front 4, a guy like Jatius Gear comes to mind. And with the return of Jordan Strawn, you feel pretty good about one edge spot. If Gear can live up to the expectations set on him, if he can carry over what he did at Syracuse, hey, there's a transition from ACC to SEC. Gamecock fans and SEC fans alike love to talk about how inferior the competition is. Well, we're going to see. Is Gear, how does he fare with the step up in competition? Is he able to, as I mentioned previously, not only fill the shoes of a departed Jordan Birch, not only fill the shoes of a departed Gilbert Edmond, of course, Birch now being at Oregon and Edmond now being at Florida State, is he able to be even better than they were? South Carolina's defensive front has to get fixed. Rushing the quarterback has to be a strength of this football team, especially when you factor in the schedule. Week 1, Drake May and the North Carolina Tar Heels. Week 3, Carson Beck, who, yes, I know is a new quarterback, but has the best array of weapons at the wide receiver position Georgia has seen in decades, I would argue. Will Rogers in Mississippi State. It's no longer the air raid, but still one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC. And then Joe Milton in Tennessee and Josh Heupel's offense. Guys, if your pass rush isn't up to par, if your defensive front isn't ready to wreak havoc, it's going to be a very, very rough start to the 2023 season. Jatius Gear is one of those leaders up front. And when you're looking for leaders on the defensive side, by the way, sure, Nick Eamon-Warry's one. Mo Kaba comes back from injury. I think Strawn could be that dude up front. But could Jatius Gear, a guy who has success at the Power 5 level, has success in big-time college football, can he be one of those dudes for South Carolina? We've heard good things out of fall camp. This was a big pickup when South Carolina landed him, bringing a South Carolina guy home, of course, being from Anderson, South Carolina. And you think back to when South Carolina was winning and winning big, 2010, 11, 12, 13. What did they have off the edge? They had big, long, explosive, athletic players at the edge position, athletic players at defensive end, athletic players getting after the quarterback. Jatius Gear could be that dude. Is he ready to emerge, fill in, and be even better? Maybe be the best defensive end South Carolina has on this roster. If you have a dynamic duo in Strawn and Gear, all of a sudden, things open up for you. And I think your defense is able to benefit from that and take a step forward. So, Jatius Gear, a guy, all the expectations on him. Can he live up to those? We shall see. Guys, we're going to jump into another break. On the side, I want to continue to keep the convo rolling here on this Thursday. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is brought to you by our friends at Carolina Cigars. Carolina Cigars has been in operation since 2008, recently taken over by the Peterson family in 2020. Whether you're new to the cigar scene or whether you've been enjoying cigars your entire life, Carolina Cigars has the expertise and knowledge to make your visit to their shop enjoyable. Stop by for a fine cigar and experience their classic cigar lounge where people come together, share conversations, and become friends. So if you're into cigars and you're on Hilton Head Island, you really do need to go by and see them. They offer same-day shipping nationwide, free delivery island-wide for weddings and all special occasions. They're also proud to offer premium cigars at 9 outside humidor locations around Hilton Head Island, and they have special events throughout the year as well. They want to talk to you. They want to engage. They want to share with you their cigar selection they're very proud of and their beautiful cigar lounge. When you're in the Low Country, there's only one place for cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, and there's only one place I get my cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, Hilton Head Island's premier cigar merchant. Come and share your passion. It's all here at Carolina Cigars. Give them a follow on Instagram at Carolina_cigars, or give them a call today at 843-681-8600. That's 843-681-8600. Smoke them if you got them, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya. The Daily Crow is also sponsored by Rhine Law Firm, LLC, principally managed by James R. Rhine Jr., located at 1350 Ashley River Road, Suite 650, Charleston, South Carolina, 29407, serving the greater Charleston area.
Marshall Dougie, ho.
All right, guys, we're back here on this Thursday, August the 10th, 2023. I want to say thank you all so much for tuning in. Appreciate the love, appreciate the support as we talk Gamecocks defensive line and continue to count down days until kickoff. Just 23 days until toe meets leather. And, guys, I will tell you this. I don't know if you can tell. I'm ready for kickoff. I'm ready to start talking some actual ball, some things happening on the field. I'm looking forward to it. I know you are all as well, but in the meantime, again, we keep the convo rolling. Talking Gamecocks defensive line. Who is the best overall defensive lineman on South Carolina's roster entering the 2023 season? And let me preface by saying this. I would like to apologize because I did not talk about this guy nearly enough in our first segment when we talked top storylines with the Gamecocks defensive line. And I think that is honestly a representation of what happens with this guy because of his mannerisms and maybe because he's on the quiet side. He's not really boisterous or making any headlines, whatever. Just a dude, kind of a lunch pail guy. Goes out, does his job. Not a whole lot of theatrics or anything crazy, nothing wild on social media. He just goes out and gets the job done. And it's even crazy to think how good this guy was last year. I looked at the numbers, I looked at the stats and said, I don't remember him being that good. I don't remember him making that impact at that level. But he did. Everyone last year was focused on 5-star Zach Pickens, 5-star Jordan Birch, this guy that. And they all forgot about Tonka Hemingway. And again, I was able to meet him at SEC Media Days and just a very nice dude, soft-spoken, kind of just to himself. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons why this is a dude who's overlooked. Because you look at his numbers last year, and I even feel like the impact he had at defensive tackle was somewhat overshadowed because of what he did on special teams. Because it was like, remember Tonka Hemingway in a 2-point conversion? Remember Tonka on special teams? We don't really talk about how good this dude was on the interior defensive front for South Carolina. 33 tackles, 8 tackles for loss, and 4 sacks for the Gamecocks. And again, those numbers jumped out to me. I was somewhat surprised. I was thinking, how did I forget how good Tonka Hemingway was? I mean, we knew he was good, but, he's good. He's all right. No, he's your leader up front. When you look at this defensive front, this defensive line, dudes you're banking on to have a big-time season, Tonka Hemingway's that dude. We're talking about a guy who has all-conference type of potential. He's big and physical enough to play inside. He's athletic enough to slide outside, rush the quarterback. Like I said, we all saw what he did on special teams a season ago. He's athletic enough to do that. Tonka Hemingway is a dude. And someone that he is the best overall, but I also want to see take the next step. I want to see him take his game to the next level. He's been a nice player for South Carolina, no doubt. But now Zach Pickens is gone. Jordan Birch off the edge is gone. Gilbert Edmond, he's gone. For a defensive front looking for answers, this is Tonka Hemingway's time to shine. And I'm excited to see him build off that 2022 season. 33 tackles, 8 tackles for loss, and 4 sacks? Can he elevate his game? A unit that needs him to do so. Can he elevate his game from, nice player, fun stats, to being a legitimate force in the middle, an all-conference type of defensive tackle? I think he's got the ability. I think he's got the game. I think he leads this South Carolina defensive front. And it just stands out to me how maybe forgotten he is on Carolina's defense as a whole because of being soft-spoken and not boisterous and the personality not being, he's got a big personality, but it's tame. It's not, maybe he's not the flashiest player or, the most fun to talk about, if you will. But just the dude who simply shows up and gets the job done. Shows up, does his job, puts up numbers, and is a force for South Carolina in the middle. So we talked about the defensive tackles back in our first segment. Them living up to expectations, living up to the hype. Being the unit that I believe Shane Beamer believes they can be. A lot of that will come down to Tonka Hemingway building off what he did last season and being that leader for South Carolina on the interior defensive line. Guys, we're going to jump into another break. We've got Mark Ryan coming up. We're also going to take some questions in the meantime, and I believe we might have Mark Ryan jump on the show early, around 1:05 or so. So all of that and more on the other side. You guys leave us your questions, your comments, what have you. We'll continue to talk defensive line. We'll get into that, and we'll keep the conversation rolling here on this Thursday. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is brought to you by our friends at Carolina Cigars. Carolina Cigars has been in operation since 2008, recently taken over by the Peterson family in 2020. Whether you're new to the cigar scene or whether you've been enjoying cigars your entire life, Carolina Cigars has the expertise and knowledge to make your visit to their shop enjoyable. Stop by for a fine cigar and experience their classic cigar lounge where people come together, share conversations, and become friends. So if you're into cigars and you're on Hilton Head Island, you really do need to go by and see them. They offer same-day shipping nationwide, free delivery island-wide for weddings and all special occasions. They're also proud to offer premium cigars at 9 outside humidor locations around Hilton Head Island, and they have special events throughout the year as well. They want to talk to you. They want to engage. They want to share with you their cigar selection they're very proud of and their beautiful cigar lounge. When you're in the Low Country, there's only one place for cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, and there's only one place I get my cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, Hilton Head Island's premier cigar merchant. Come and share your passion. It's all here at Carolina Cigars. Give them a follow on Instagram at Carolina_cigars, or give them a call today at 843-681-8600. That's 843-681-8600. Smoke them if you got them, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya. The Daily Crow is also sponsored by Rhine Law Firm, LLC, principally managed by James R. Rhine Jr., located at 1350 Ashley River Road, Suite 650, Charleston, South Carolina, 29407, serving the greater Charleston area.
Muscle Dougie, ho, Dougie, ho.
All right, guys, we're back here on this Thursday, August the 10th, 2023. Again, appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. We'll keep the conversation rolling regarding Gamecocks defensive line tomorrow as we wrap it up and talk. Season will be successful if, as well as locking the overall grade for the Gamecocks defensive line. And, as you talk about that group, guys, I'll say this, by the way. Let me just say this. We're at a point in the preseason where we're going back to numbers that we've been talking about forever, over and over and over and over again. I mean, numbers that have been out and about since preseason magazines dropped back in late May. We're going on probably our third month or so, excuse me, of talking about these numbers. And so I know you all get tired of hearing it, but it is crazy. I just saw a tweet from SEC StatCat that South Carolina apparently, let's see, South Carolina, only Vandy has had a worse defensive success rate and tackles for loss rate than the Cocks with an SEC play since Beamer's arrival. Meanwhile, South Carolina has been the only conference team with both a bottom 5 offensive and defensive rushing yards before contact average in that time. That is very interesting. That is very, very interesting. So we wonder, why don't the computers like South Carolina? I don't think it's bias in any way. I don't think it's, the analytics just hates Carolina because they hate Carolina. I think there's actual numbers to support that South Carolina has played with fire and cheated death. They have absolutely played with fire. And listen, they've done the most important thing, which is find ways to win games. That's it. Find ways to win games. So who cares what the numbers say? But eventually, the numbers tend to come true. So are you able to year after year after year defy what the numbers say? That's the question. Stats aren't everything, but they do give you a good indication of what may happen. Again, guys, we're getting Mark Ryan on the show very, very soon. Excuse me. We're getting Mark Ryan on the show very, very soon. Looking forward to chatting with Mark. Going to be a really, really good time. Again, guys, I'm excited, ready for kickoff. Looking forward to 23 days. Looking forward to week 0 getting underway. So we're only 16 days until actual college football beginning. We've got NFL preseason this weekend. One thing I've noticed too, does it feel like that, practices closed a long time ago, right? Open practices are a thing of the past. I mean, but does it feel like the fall camp intel is as little as it used to, or as little as it's ever been? Like it feels like to me like we just don't get a ton of fall camp intel like we used to. I know there's things here and there, what have you. I mean, I think unfortunately also too, one of the reasons is that you take everything coming out of fall camp with a grain of salt. I mean, I haven't heard one fall camp report that says that, oh, this team's not going to be good. This unit's struggling. We need to do this better. Everybody's 12-0 right now. Everybody's good. Everybody's got a great team. Everybody's going undefeated. Which is normal. It's the nature of the beast. But I I don't know, man. I personally take it all with a grain of salt. I really do. I take it all with a grain of salt. But that doesn't mean you can't. There are certain nuggets, certain small things you hear, what have you, that you're excited about. I like what Travis Allen said earlier, and again, guys, we'll get into more of these in our Q&A Power Hour. Stop putting high expectations on guys and just let them prove their worth on the team. That is very much so what has happened, with South Carolina's defensive front. Guys, it feels like it's really, truly a tale as old as time that every single year we come into a season, look at all the talent on the defensive line. Look at all the talent on the defensive front. And it never equates to stopping the run. It never equates to good rushing defense for whatever reason. It never pans out to it. And so when I look at the Gamecocks defensive front, when you look at that defensive line, I mean, I guess you say there's nowhere to go but up. When you finish 116th in the country stopping the run, you give up 198 yards per game. Can it get any worse? I don't know that it can. I don't know that it can get any worse than it was a season ago. And for whatever reason, South Carolina has just struggled. Some games more glaring than others, but they have struggled to stop the run on a consistent basis. And I don't know what the deal is. Hopefully, Travian Robertson starts to solve that. Anyways, guys, 843-790-3377. Make sure you flood the question line on YouTube, flood the voicemail line, whatever it might be. We will get to all of your questions, your comments, everything else in our third hour. Again, guys, you can just feel it, man. You can just feel it. The anticipation for college football, it's at a fever pitch. We're to the point where these last 20 days or so, really these last, I would say, these last like 10 days or 13 days or what have you. Like once we get to game week, we're golden. We're set. We're talking ball. We're breaking down matchups, all that good stuff. But right now, it's like, again, we're kind of, and I find myself in this position every single year where I feel like I'm starting to repeat some of the same things I've been saying over and over and over and over again. They're like, there's things that they're important. They should be repeated, right? They should be said. But I'm finding myself doing that. And I'm like, all right, I'm ready to start talking about somebody else. I'm ready to start talking a matchup, a game, giving a prediction for a game, things of that nature. So obviously not complaining, because I love doing the position at preview series and love breaking it all down and talking about it with you all. But we definitely are at that point where it's like, all right, let's push through these final 20 days, 23 days, if you will. We're going to push through here together. We're going to get to game week and cannot wait for it. I guess it'd be about 18 days, 17 or 18 days until we get to game week, right? Yeah, because we've got 16 days until week 0. Yeah, 16 days till week 0. So no, it'd be 14 days, right? 14 days until that Monday of I'm all thrown off. Yeah. My math's not mathing right now. 23 days till week 1. Yeah, 16 days to week 0. Okay. Anyways, guys, 843-790-3377. Cox by one, having a cigar. I love that. You know, it's funny. I see you rocking that hat too. My hat from University Traditions. It's been sitting at the UPS store for a couple of days. I got to go pick that up. Michael Edwards, is it more on the D line to stop the run or the linebackers? That's a great question, Michael. You know, I was able to ask, obviously, Shane Beamer about this at SEC Media Days, the addition of Travian Robertson, stopping the run as a whole, new blood, new guys in there, right? Similar to the offensive line. Maybe there's an addition by subtraction. It's very interesting, the similarities between those two groups, by the way, because both have the same issue from a season ago, the run game. And Beamer pointed out it's all 11, but it's the linebackers play a huge role. I mean, it's the front seven as a whole. It really is. You know, we put all the pressure on the defensive line, but it falls on all seven of those guys. It falls on that entire front seven. And in the 4-2-5, I'd say the front six. But your guys in the box, it falls on them. It falls on them to get the job done, for sure. Guys, it appears we have Mark Ryan waiting in the wings. We'll see if we can get some video up, and then we'll get him in here. Okay, looks like Mark is ready to go. Again, guys, I appreciate you all with the punches. Obviously, we're double dipping with guests today, but he joins us every single Thursday here on the airwaves. Now we sit just over 3 weeks away from week 1 of the college football season, just 2 weeks away from week 0 in college football returning. He joins us every week. Mark Ryan of the Fan Upstate. Mark, what's going on, my friend? Appreciate you taking the time.
My dear Gamecock friends, how are we doing on this fine Thursday? I see one of my best friends, J.C. Sherbert, is also joining the show today as well. Chris Phillips, what is good, my friend? Congratulations on all the blessings in your life. You smell that in the air? It is not my fart, Chris. It is football that is in the offing, and this smells delicious. I cannot wait. Is Dakereon Joyner capable of being an RB1?
I believe he is. I believe he is. I think it's going to be running back by committee, though, admittedly. I think it's going to be ride the hot hand. Is he capable? Yes. I think there are some things, the offensive line has to hold up their end of the bargain. But, I mean, I think he's got the athleticism for sure. I tell you this, Mark, because you bring that up. I mean, he is – for me, he might be the most intriguing player on this entire roster. I mean, really, truly, because folks have been clamoring for years for Dakereon Joyner to touch the football more. He's such an athlete. And I think with Dakereon Joyner, what makes it so fascinating, right? And why he's so polarizing. Number one, he's a homegrown guy, right? Coming from Fort Dorchester, everybody loves the in-state guys going to the in-state school and succeeding. Also, he had that glimmer of hope, the glimmer of, the flash, if you will, in the Duke's Mayo Bowl against North Carolina. And you're like, this dude's a baller. He needs to be on the field. And then the selflessness to move from quarterback to receiver, now at running back. But what I think so intriguing is now he's in the spotlight. He's a focal point of the offense. What is he able to do with it? Because I didn't think he was much of a receiver. I'll be honest. I think that was more of a, let's just kind of move him to somewhere he can at least maybe get some reps. But that was never really a natural fit for him. Now at running back, is it? I'm just fascinated, Mark, to see what he does with the Gamecocks offensively. I just, now that he has a real opportunity to really shine.
Chris, I've looked at no fewer than 6 Gamecock depth charts.
Mm-hmm.
And DK is number 1 on all 6 at the running back position. Mm-hmm. I found that incredibly interesting, incredibly telling. And, with a guy like that, why can't he play the Percy Harvin or Deebo Samuel role to you? Now, Percy, when I mention that I'm leaning more RB than wide receiver, but kind of a slash type of player for you, mm-hmm. He's got a diverse enough skill set to do that. And you consider, his age and how much the male body matures, Chris, between the ages of 18 and 22. You've seen 2- and 3-star college basketball programs with a bunch of seniors beat Kentucky with their five freshmen, right? 5-star freshmen, the Fab Five from Michigan. Because the body matures so rapidly at that age, it changes form so much. So Dakereon Joyner is going to be a strength, athleticism, and matchup mismatch for a lot of defenses this year. And look, man, I mean, you've got to be excited if you're a Gamecock fan at just the possibilities. Now, granted, it's a big if everything clicks, and the offensive line being a question mark, that's not a positive. But you consider the potential of Nick Harbor, the potential of Juice Wells, right? The potential of Spencer Rattler, the potential of DK Joyner. If we talk about those four guys, if they all hit, like we said, Chris, you're talking about a top 10 offense in America, and it's going to be very exciting. And North Carolina better hope that they add a D to that name, because I've spelled out North Carolina 10 different times, and none of them do I find the letter D in that spelling. They better hope they find a D before the season begins, man, because if those guys get off the ground running, it could be a beatdown in Charlotte.
Mark, switching gears, I'm curious if you're like me. Do you get to a point in the preseason, as we sit 23 days away from kickoff, where you get a little bit antsy and like the anticipation's at such a fever pitch to where I kind of feel like, we're almost starting to repeat things we've said over the course of a long summer, and we've broken down these football teams in every which way we can. And it's like, I'm just like, at this point, man, I'm like, and I love talking about it. We're breaking down position units. I love it, but it's like, just get me the game week, man. Like, I'm ready to start talking about an actual football game on the field. Maybe it's even more so emphasized, Mark, this offseason because of the mass conference realignment and the portal and the NIL stuff. And it's like, dude, I'm just so ready to get to actual football on the field of play. Do you feel the same way? Does that happen to you, to where you're like, it starts to kind of drag those last 20 days and you're just like, just get to the finish line?
Man, it's like this with the NFL draft in my profession too, Chris. It's like you discover and you use all of your A-level material. And then the week of the draft, it's like, I have covered this every which way. It's hard to find something new. But then, Chris, you get something new like we got this week on North Carolina and South Carolina, with the Tar Heels being ranked 20th and the Gamecocks not being ranked at all. And you've got two coaches that want to play the underdog, nobody respects us, chip on our shoulder, little old Clemson type of role, right? Both coaches want to play that role. But the coaches did the Tar Heels no favors by having them ranked and not ranking South Carolina. I'll be real with you, Chris. When we did our picks, I picked North Carolina in that game. I am much closer again to a coin flip, largely because of that. Because like that results in one team starting the game angry, right? And I just think that sort of stuff matters, man. That level of disrespect. That, North Carolina, Mac Brown's done a real nice job recruiting. I'm not going to say they have more talent than South Carolina. I think their quarterback position is more polished. At the same time, Chris, look, I think that was actually a boon to South Carolina, a benefit to South Carolina, that North Carolina begins the year ranked and the Gamecocks don't. There's going to be a ton of fire and brimstone coming out of those helmets when they come running out of the tunnel in Charlotte.
Yeah, you bring up, Mark, the USA Today coaches poll, the top 25. And, of course, the AP poll will drop on Monday at noon, I believe it is. Clemson ranked 9th in that poll. I heard you guys talking, you and Diesel, talking about which top 10 team is most likely to finish unranked. Not all that surprised to hear you say Florida State, but certainly, I mean, there's a case to be made there, but one of the most overrated teams in college football. You mentioned UNC being 20th. South Carolina gets 89 votes at 27th. Florida, Mark, right behind them at 28th, 63 votes. What do you make of that? I mean, are we sleeping on the Gators going into this year?
Chris, this is the season where everybody's going to win the national championship. And, right. Everybody wants something to have hope for and to be excited for. And then by the end of September, all that hope is going to be extinguished for some teams, right? It could certainly be for Florida with at Utah on the horizon, Tennessee early in the year as well. Same with the Gamecocks, right? North Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi State. What will the mood be at the end of September if the Gamecocks drop each of those three contests? The feeling in Gainesville is optimism, Chris. There is a feeling, there is a hope that this team might be capable of 8-4, maybe even 9-3. But I will tell you this, Chris, when I look at the blue chip ratio for 2023, there's 16 teams that have the basic prerequisite to win a national title. Half of their roster is 4- and 5-star talent. I take 3 teams out of that in terms of teams that make the playoff next year. I got a list of 25 teams, Chris, that actually have a somewhat decent shot of getting in. These are basically the only 25 teams that have a shot. I shared on our show Offsides yesterday. I removed 3 blue chip ratio teams: Texas A&M, Auburn, and Florida. Florida's roster has talent, Chris. It's just not ready. Auburn is breaking in a new head coach, and you're never going to get me to, go from geek to chic. The level of A&M being 5-7 to the college football playoff, that's just too risky for me, man. If you're willing to put down on that, good on you. I am not. But Chris, I do think there's talent there in Gainesville. Billy Napier just needs time, and he needs patience. And I'm going to remind any Gator fan of that if Florida stumbles to like 5-7 or 6-6 again this year. I think you would tell me the same thing about South Carolina, though, right? Yeah. I mean, if South Carolina were to disappoint with a 6-6 or a 7-5 this year, and Gamecock fans, I do think they're better than Florida. I do. Chris will remind you that I picked the Gamecocks to win that game 37-17. South Carolina coming off a bye right in that game. But I do think, Chris, when you go back at this, right, like the message is going to be give Beamer time. It's not to say that this year doesn't matter. Coaches oftentimes pop in year 3, but I don't think, regardless of the results, there's not going to be a portion of the fan base calling for his head if it goes sideways this year either, is there?
No, I don't believe so. I think that, listen, we bottom 10%, we talk about who knows what they might say, but in regards to like real conversation, no, there will be no backlash of that sort. And, you talk about, Mark, the importance of year 3. I heard this stat yesterday. And I don't know if you knew this, but 80% of coaches that are going to appear in their first SEC championship game at their new school, they do so by year 3. So if you don't do it by year 3, it's very unlikely that it's going to happen. So to your point, like if you're a big-time coach at a big-time program and you're going to make waves like that, normally you do it really, really quickly, which I just thought was really interesting. I believe Steve Spurrier, though, is one of those 20% that does not fall into that. So
100%. Yeah, Steve Spurrier didn't do it in year 3. And Chris, I'll tell you, I'm in the process of completing a statistical analysis. You're going to be relieved to know it does not compare Muschamp and Beamer this time. But Chris, I have data in the 4-team playoff era. I'm in the process of compiling the data for the 12-team playoff era, and I'm going to give you guys the scoop here in the skinny. Chris, in order to make the 4-team playoff, right, you need to have a 4-year recruiting average, all right, around class rank number 10. In those 4 years, Chris, you can have an individual class that might be as low as number 20, but not outside of the top 20. So you're looking at a 4-year rolling average, right? 4-year rolling average. And I am in the process right now of completing that the last 3 years for the final 12 teams in the CFP rankings, Chris. Where do you have to be? Certainly it's going to be easier to get into the CFP than it was. But up until this point, Chris, to get in, you had to have an average 4-year class ranking of number 10. You could have your outlier class could be as bad as number 20, but not worse. And it gives you, as a Gamecock fan, a chance to really see, okay, how far away are we? You throw out year 1 for Beamer, that class was ranked number 80. What was year 2, Chris? Was it, I want to say 24, 25?
Yeah, 24, I believe, was the final class ranking. Yeah, for his first full class, yes.
Okay.
Okay. And then 16 last year.
16 last year. So you have now one class that could be considered moving toward a 4-team playoff. The beautiful thing is you don't even have to be that good. Maybe the 4-year recruiting average for a 12-team playoff, Chris, will be 16th, in which case South Carolina already has their first year and they're well on their way to having their second. But when that research is complete, you guys will know for sure.
Mark, I heard you talk about a couple of days on your show. all right, maybe it was yesterday, but what would deter you from watching college football anymore, right? Because conference realignment's happening, the portal
Disgusting,
stuff,
man.
NIL.
Freaking
What so
disgusting.
let me
Makes
turn
me
it on
puke.
you. What would it take? Because it's a fun convo to have, but to completely just walk away from college football and to not watch anymore. And I know you made the point, right? Like you and I do it for a living. So are you ever going to really be able to just completely, cold turkey get rid of it? But I mean, for you, what would it take for you to no longer maybe put college football at the top in regards to your interests and kind of lose that love that you have for the sport?
Well, first of all, Chris, they say that the most difficult time in the marriage is at the 1 year anniversary. Okay. My 1 year anniversary of marriage is coming on October 12th. And I'm looking at the calendar. I'm like, sheesh, right a month into college football season. Well, what could possibly go wrong? Well, the thing is, Chris, for me right now, college football Saturdays are 10 a.m. until 2 a.m. Sunday. And dude, I put a dent in the couch here, brother. I don't move. Okay. I move to get a beer. I move to get chips. I got the Cheeto dust on my shirt. But outside of that, man, I am not really moving. And so, like you said, Chris, we love college football so much. I don't know that anything could keep us away forever, but it could become less of a priority where you go from that 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. Sunday until, sweetie, I only need the noon time slot today, and then the rest of the day is yours, right? That's what the NFL is to me right now. Okay, I look at the slate. What game do I absolutely have to watch? And then, sweetheart, we can do things around the rest of the time. I can just catch the highlights, no big deal. Chris, and that is the thing, and unfortunately it's heading in that direction. If college football feels like the NFL, we had Brett McMurphy on the CBS Sports Radio show last Saturday, and he said so much of college football is now following the NFL model. And it disgusts me, Chris. And that's why I implore the SEC to be the one stalwart that maintains regionality in college football. They still have a loose claim to it, Chris. I know Texas and Oklahoma are not really Southeast. I know Missouri is not really Southeast. But you can draw a line around the SEC schools, and there isn't really an anomaly, right? Like it somewhat makes sense. Please, for all that is good and holy, maintain that, Chris. Because if it starts to feel like the NFL, it just loses so much to me about what makes college football unique and special. I posted a tweet today, Chris, about the most popular conferences in college football. The Pac-12 was the fourth most popular conference with 25 million fans. Think about the geography of these conferences, Chris. The ACC is East Coast. The SEC is obviously Southeast. The Big 12 is Heartland of America, Center of America. The West Coast just lost its college football conference, Chris, forever. And some of those people are never going to come back, right? They're never going to come back, no matter what conference their team is in, because that was their league. Imagine for a moment the SEC going up in smoke and how it would make you feel. Right. And it's disgusting. So it's more of a feel, Chris, than anything else. But if it feels like college football has become Florida is playing Cal in a conference game, that's when you lose me. How about you?
Well, I don't know. Again, regionality, losing of that. I mean, losing out on rivalries is something. I don't really know, Mark, what it would take for me to just stop watching college football. I don't know what I don't know. I don't know what that looks like. I really don't. And I know
But the other thing, Chris, is this. The other thing is this. Like, even with this 2024 schedule, they're using it as like a pilot, right? That's what they call the first TV show, a pilot.
Right.
And how mad are the fans really going to get when we remove all their traditional rivals or most of their traditional rivals? And Chris, I'm pissed. Like you guys might not believe it, but I want to play you every year. I want to play Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Tennessee, Georgia, Missouri every year, because that is a commonality that you share with Florida fans or South Carolina fans from every generation. Let me tell you about the Kentucky game in my year. Chris Doering caught a pass with 3 seconds left that beat Kentucky, that kept the streak alive where the Gators beat Kentucky 28 straight years. That was the Kentucky game my year. Man, they have no right to burn those bridges and to rip those rivalries away from us. And they're doing it, Chris. and they're doing it in the name of giving us Florida at Texas A&M more often. Give me a break, man. I want Kentucky. I want South Carolina. I want Florida. I want Vandy on that wall. I need them on that wall.
Mark, you were obviously ahead of the curve when it came to the Florida State Clemson stuff, what they wanted to do. What are you hearing? What are you hearing now in regards to, I think it's pretty out there now. FSU, they want out the grant of rights situation. Clemson, I don't think they're quite as loud about it, but I don't think they're really happy with revenue distribution, what have you. The SEC does seem like a very natural fit. It doesn't sound like the Southeastern Conference is open to expansion right now, but I'm sure for the right team, they would at least consider it. We've also heard Big Ten. I mean, what's your just the latest on that and thoughts on the futures of FSU, Clemson, and we'll just say the entire ACC as well?
Chris, my source 2 years ago was exactly right. And where are all the people who yelled at me, Chris, to tell me they were wrong and to tell me they're sorry? Where are all those people? The tweet read that Clemson and Florida State had reached out to the SEC with interest in joining, but that the SEC did not feel like their streaming numbers added anything that they didn't already have, and that Notre Dame was the only free agent left that added to the pot. Now, Paul Feinbaum himself, Chris, said that that was the single most ridiculous rumor that he'd ever heard, and said that that has not even 1% chance of ever happening. This last week, Paul Feinbaum was quoted in Athlon saying that Clemson and Florida State are the two most natural fits for the SEC. So which is it, Paul? Where is my fruit basket, Paul, with your apology from 2 years ago? Because, Chris, as I shared with you many times, I was able to have a conversation with a top 10 national college football voice that didn't want to share this because he didn't want the inevitable smoke that came with it. And you know me, Chris, like you, I don't care about the smoke. I'll deal with the smoke. I continue to hear, Chris, that Notre Dame would be added yesterday if they would ever join the conference. And I actually disagree with the SEC about this. They feel like Clemson and Florida State don't add anything they don't already have. Chris, to me, South Carolina, having the Gamecocks maybe gives you 30 to 40% of the state. Having Clemson maybe gives you 60 to 70% of the state. You want the entire Palmetto State? You need both, right? If you want the entire Sunshine State, you need Florida, Florida State, and Miami, right? But if you have Florida and Florida State, that'll get you 2/3 of the state. So this notion that you already have the state doesn't make any sense, Chris. Does having Rutgers give you New York? How many, Chris, like you and me watching Rutgers football in New York City would be the first two viewers they have in that city. So, Chris, I just say, like, there is a major fallacy going on, and it is how the conference commissioners think, right? That, hey, man, San Diego State is really valuable because it gives us the San Diego market. Well, how many people in that market are watching San Diego State, right? Mm-hmm. You can add San Diego State. You can fight with the cable operators to try to get them to cover, a Mountain West network, if you will. But if people there aren't watching it, it doesn't matter that you have San Diego State. And so you continue to see, Chris, these big market schools be prioritized. And in a lot of cases, it's senseless. The Big 12 adds Houston. Brother, I lived in Houston. Nobody in Houston watches Houston Cougars football. It doesn't give you Houston. It doesn't give you Houston at all. So, Chris, Clemson and Florida State would be natural SEC fits for me. So I disagree with the SEC, but the SEC is not interested in them at this time.
Mark, you bring up something that I'm really glad you did because I had forgotten about it, but I wanted to ask you about. You say that with South Carolina being in the SEC has 30% of the state. If they add Clemson, they get the other 70%. Why is there a 70-30 split in that manner? Why is it not the other way around, seeing as South Carolina is the flagship university of the state? Why does Clemson have,
Chris,
we'll say, 70% of market share?
Yeah, this is not Mark Ryan trying to poke the Gamecocks.
No, I'm just genuinely curious. I heard you say that before, and I'm like, where do these numbers come in?
Yeah, it's just number of fans, Chris. There's a bunch of studies that show the number of fans in college football, and Clemson has more total fans than South Carolina does. Incidentally, Florida, about 6 million fans nationwide, has more fans than any other team in the SEC. The SEC has only 2 of the top 10 fan bases in the country. The SEC has the most passionate fans, Chris, right? But other conferences, other schools have a larger number of casuals, shall we say, right? So the reality is, Chris, maybe Florida has more fans than Florida State does. But if you want a larger percentage of the state, you got to claim the Seminoles, right? Clemson has more total fans than South Carolina does. But I'm sure you would agree, Chris, if you want, like, to say that you have the Palmetto State because you have the Gamecocks, isn't that kind of senseless? You live in the upstate, Chris. Do you see more Clemson fans or South Carolina fans walking around? This is the upstate's this is the state's largest market.
Right.
You know, what do you see more of?
Yeah, there's more orange and purple for sure. I will say, though, it's been shocking. This is on a total side note. Been shocking how little orange and purple I've seen since I got up here, but you win the game on the field, and that kind of helps that. So, but no, to your point, there's Clemson fans everywhere. You definitely don't have the entire Palmetto State. I heard you say that, and I was like, see, I learned something. I didn't know that Clemson had more fans than South Carolina. I had no idea, to be honest with you. So that's a new fact to me. Nor did I know about the Florida State comparison. So,
well, there you go, man. There you go. Most recent tweet from me today, Chris, is fans by conference. You know, the conferences with the most fans. Who's number one?
I would imagine you said it wasn't the SEC, right? It's the Big Ten. Is that right?
No, the SEC.
I haven't looked at your Twitter, so 10. I apologize.
Yeah. No, the SEC only has 2 of the top 10 individual fan bases, but the SEC actually does have the greatest number of fans in the sport. Okay. So there you go. But again, you know, and Chris, I'll ask you this, man. Is Clemson in the SEC something you want? Because you know why Clemson is itching to get to the SEC. The number one reason is you.
Yeah.
That, you know, it's in the number one reason Florida State wants in the SEC is Florida. They can't stomach their rival having a $30 million annual advantage over them. And that's why they want out of their current agreement. Now, you said it earlier, Clemson's more quiet about this than Florida State. Why? Because they're a charter member of the ACC, right? Florida State doesn't care about burning that bridge. Florida State doesn't feel the sense of loyalty that Clemson does, right? You might remember a couple of years ago when I sent out that tweet, Chris, Clemson came out immediately and vehemently denying something that I knew to be true. Florida State had a delayed response and a more muted response to that. All of that is noteworthy in the grander scheme of things. But they know, Chris, that South Carolina is going to start dominating in that rivalry unless they bridge that gap in terms of the overall income being intake of the program. And the same with Florida and Florida State. You can win temporarily like that. You can't win long-term like that. And that's why Florida State and Clemson know that something has to change. You know, if I'm the ACC, Chris, if I'm, ACC brass, I'm doing my best to convince ESPN that we need a new TV deal, because in the end, they're not going to have a great product unless they do get that new TV deal, Chris, right? Mm-hmm. You can say, well, ESPN, why would they renegotiate? They signed the deal. Well, you got 14 unhappy members, right? You got teams trying to get out, and the product of ACC football, Chris, isn't great. You know that. I call it the All Cupcakes Conference. It's not a great product. So if Clemson joins the SEC, is that a thumbs up or thumbs down in terms of benefiting South Carolina in your mind?
You know, and my mind has shifted on this, Mark, because a couple of months ago I went on record and said I wouldn't mind it, bring it on, embrace competition. You play them every year anyways. It adds another level or another layer of emphasis to the rivalry. But, you know, I think nobody wants to see their arch rival, you know, get that advantage. And I think it would be obviously an advantage monetarily for them. I think status-wise. And I think, too, by the way, you got to go back some historical context. There's, you know, South Carolina, when they jumped from the ACC, I think they thought that Clemson was going to come with them, and that didn't happen. And so Carolina was stranded as kind of this independent, floating, didn't know what was going to happen. And so, you know, I would say Screw them would be the answer. Yeah, I don't think anybody wants to see Clemson in the SEC. Listen, if they join, I'm not gonna. It is what it is. You just go beat them on the field and embrace the competition. But any advantage you can have over your rival, you'll take it. And so, being in the best conference in the country versus what they're in, I think is one you want to keep. So, I think
And
that's kind
that
of the
is
way
the
you look at it.
answer that every single South Carolina fan should have.
Right.
And
Indeed.
every single Florida fan should be putting up roadblocks for Florida State to join the SEC as often as they can, because you have a $30 million year advantage. And if you don't think that advantage is going to show up on the field, you better ask somebody. It most certainly is.
Mark, final thing on the NIL note, because, of course, again, it's that time of year. We're talking about that. You and I talked on Monday, the Jalewis Solomon thing that happened. And I don't really want to rehash that entire series of events because it was madness over the weekend. But, you asked me this question, so I'm going to kind of turn it back on you. The role the NIL plays right now. And I don't know if you saw the Johnny Manziel documentary, and it documented his time at A&M and really the way that he was exploited by the NCAA. Back when athletes could not even sign an autograph and get paid for it without getting suspended, getting in trouble, what have you. I'm glad players are profiting off of their name, image, and likeness. How do we reel it in, though? Because people that are sitting here saying, well, it's illegal to use it in recruiting, to pitch that as a bullshit. That's BS. I know that's BS. It's being used, obviously. We know that's happening. And I wonder, with the role of NIL, the collectives, and then you have things like the Gamecock Club. You have IPTE. You have, I'm sure there's something at Florida that's like your booster that's been around forever. How do we reel it in, I guess, is my question. Because I don't see a way you stop it. I don't see a way you put the genie back in the bottle and stop people from, if they've got a lump sum of cash they want to give to a prospect to go to their school, what can you do? What can be done about it?
Chris, you've got to have compliance officers at every school that are not employed by the school, but are employed by the NCAA. Then when that person uncovers a major scandal by the school, they're replaced for their own safety, right? Because as well as I do, Chris, bottom 10 percenters everywhere will come after that person for outing that school. But you have to have legitimate compliance officers that are trying to find wrongdoing at the schools, that are admitted, Chris, to have access to any room in the building, okay? They're admitted to have access. They can access phone records, coaches' calls with the recruits. They can access anywhere. You've got to have active compliance officers because, Chris, the reality is, it is BS and it is happening, and it was happening even before NIL. But when certain programs are cheating, Chris, and others are not, and when you're using NIL as an inducement and not like I do endorsements on my show, which is what NIL was supposed to be. If you listen to our show, guys, you'll hear me endorse different companies around the upstate. That's what NIL was supposed to be. Company reaches out to the five-star quarterback. Five-star quarterback endorses the company. Five-star quarterback gets, some cash as a result of doing that. It was never supposed to be come here to South Carolina and you get the bag, or Clemson or Florida and you get the bag. That's what has to be stopped, Chris. And the worst part is when you've got schools poaching other guys on the team. The most disgusting thing I heard all offseason, Chris, was Dave Clawson of Wake Forest saying, well, look, if Sam Hartman gets a life-changing offer, who can blame him for leaving? Dave, how do you not know that that's illegal? For him to get a life-changing offer from another school. That's an inducement. That is illegal. We have to be able, Chris, to enforce the rules that are in place. Otherwise, NIL becomes something that I do not stand for. And I would rather go back, Chris, to the old way where athletes are getting exploited and Johnny Manziel cannot sign autographs, okay, if it means we can't enforce anything. All right? I would like us to try to enforce the rules as they're designed. And a first step towards doing that is having compliance officers, plural, on every campus employed by the NCAA.
Mark Ryan of the Fan Upstate, Offsides with Mark Ryan and Diesel every single day, 3 to 7, at Mark Ryan on air on Twitter. Mark, I know that you are out of town next week. I'll be out of town the following. So, my friend, the next time that you and I speak on these airwaves, it will be game week. We will sit a couple of days away from kickoff in Charlotte, North Carolina. Cannot wait, my friend. Appreciate you. We'll talk soon.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of you guys. And just a few weeks, and we are here. We'll talk to you soon.
Talk soon, Mark. Take care. Appreciate it. Great stuff, guys, from Mark Ryan. Appreciate him taking the time, guys. We're going to jump into a quick break on the other side, as I mentioned, though. Double dipping on the guests on the other side. J.C. Sherbert of the Big Spur. He will join us here on this Thursday. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is brought to you by our friends at Carolina Cigars. Carolina Cigars has been in operation since 2008, recently taken over by the Peterson family in 2020. Whether you're new to the cigar scene or whether you've been enjoying cigars your entire life, Carolina Cigars has the expertise and knowledge to make your visit to their shop enjoyable. Stop by for a fine cigar and experience their classic cigar lounge where people come together, share conversations, and become friends. So if you're into cigars and you're on Hilton Head Island, you really do need to go by and see them. They offer same-day shipping nationwide, free delivery island-wide for weddings and all special occasions. They're also proud to offer premium cigars at 9 outside humidor locations around Hilton Head Island, and they have special events throughout the year as well. They want to talk to you. They want to engage. They want to share with you their cigar selection they're very proud of and their beautiful cigar lounge. When you're in the Low Country, there's only one place for cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, and there's only one place I get my cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, Hilton Head Island's premier cigar merchant. Come and share your passion. It's all here at Carolina Cigars. Give them a follow on Instagram at Carolina_cigars, or give them a call today at 843-681-8600. That's 843-681-8600. Smoke them if you got them, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya. Daily Crow is also sponsored by Rhine Law Firm, LLC, principally managed by James R. Rhine Jr., located at 1350 Ashley River Road, Suite 650, Charleston, South Carolina, 29407, serving the greater Charleston area.
Muscle Dougie Ho.
All right, guys, we're back here on this Thursday, August the 10th, 2023. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Want to say thank you so much to Mark Ryan of the Fan Upstate for taking the time to chat. Really, really good stuff with Mark. And again, we await now JC Sherbert here on this Thursday. Tons to get into with JC in regards to fall camp, NIL, everything in between, Gamecocks football, SEC, of course. Really looking forward to him taking the time to chat and getting into everything. So let's see. Anyways, we await JC. Good stuff with Mark today. I thought it was interesting. And in case you guys missed that, what I said, yeah, I a couple of months ago, I was just kind of on the train of, hey, you know what? Competition, embrace it, what have you. Bring Clemson to the SEC. Who cares? But if you actually start to think about the advantages that South Carolina has being in the SEC, right? The advantages they have being in the best conference in all of college football and historical context behind why you may not want them in, I think it may start to change your mind, or my mind at least, just a little bit. Like I mentioned, guys, again, calling the audibles this week, double dipping with guests. He normally joins us on Tuesday. We were able to work things out because of some travel, technical issues, what have you. Really excited to talk ball with him. Gamecocks, SEC, everything in between. Our good friend, JC Sherbert, the big spur of Inside the Gamecocks, joins the show. JC, what's going on, my friend? Great to see you yet again.
Yeah, just getting back in the swing of things here in Studio North after a planes, trains, and automobiles type of situation of my quick trip to Columbia this week. But good to be back. Next week and the next, I think you'll be talking to me from Studio South, but back in Studio North for now. And glad we can finally get up, Chris, because, man, I was wondering. It'd been a while, with all the issues. But I apologize for that. I'm glad to be with you today.
No, man, I appreciate you and glad to see you. And Studio North, Studio South, I love that. Wherever we catch you, though, man, it's always a pleasure to chat with you. So, JC, let's start with this on the NIL note because I've been asked about this a lot, and I would rather you, as the expert, answer this. I think maybe the number one question that I get in regards to collectives, and of course, this is still kind of a new thing for us all, right? Especially fans who have a million things going on, but they also want to contribute, and they want to know more about the collective side of things. Explain to people the differences, the similarities between Carolina Rise, Garnet Trust, Park Avenue, how it all ties in, and how all three of those entities are working together to present the best possible NIL opportunities for student athletes at South Carolina, because I feel like there could be, or there may be, or I know that people ask me, they have some confusion about the way the three actually work together for those NIL opportunities. And again, to put the Gamecocks in the best possible position in that space.
Sure. And I think the common mistake people make when they're kind of evaluating it is that there's some sort of competition. And to me, from our standpoint, there isn't. We both try to do the best job we can. And so that's I don't think I'm out there sucking dollars away, competing for dollars with them, and vice versa. In fact, we sort of have different strategies on how to go about it and all that good stuff. I can at least speak for my own strategy. From what I see on the surface, it's fundamentally different. That's A. B, we're not competing for like players. You see what I'm saying? Like, we're not, offering a kid a $10,000 NIL deal, then they come and say, no, we want to pay you 11 or whatever. It's all going to the players in a manner that makes sense. And you do have to have communication for that. You can't just, because, you never know what's going to happen. I mean, we've never once doubled up on a guy that we go, oh man, probably shouldn't have done that. So that's the deal too. Whether you're a member of one or a member of the other, and I call it membership because it's it's not a donation. It's a membership. It's not tax deductible in most instances. At least with us, it's not. If you're an individual, if you're a business, it certainly is, because we're kind of a membership club / promotions company / collective. That's what we do. We promote your business for you, and you pay in, and then we pay players with that for promotional opportunities. And then we have a membership club, which individuals give small dollar amounts, and we want to grow those numbers to the moon, as you say, here on the Spurs Up Show. So that's kind of what we do. I'll say right now we're focused on the slow growth crowdsourcing aspect of it, and every penny we've got right now that we make, we pump it back into the program, because we feel like that's a sustainable model. I will tell you right now, they have more money at Guarded Trust. I don't know if we may have more members like individuals, but they have more money, and they do a really good job of facilitating that money out to players and things like that, especially when it comes to football. I understand some of the tweets and things like that have gotten people fired up. I can't speak for that. I don't know. I don't necessarily have a comment on it, other than, I think that I think that the football program and the culture of the football program speaks for itself, and in a lot of ways, maybe not just a collective or whatever. They don't really need help reinforcing that, and every situation is different. And I don't think the term culture is applicable to every single time the Gamecocks may not get a recruit. And that's my opinion. I'm not jumping on them and saying what they said was totally wrong or whatever. I just that's not my intent here. But from my standpoint, though, I'll you're probably not going to hear me talk about that if a kid decides to go elsewhere. And that's just, but I'll say this too. I've said some things on Twitter I completely regret. and so I've been there, and I don't want to, I'm not piling on. I understand why people kind of raised an eyebrow to it. As far as the official thing goes, they did strike a paid deal with Learfield to become the official collective of the University of South Carolina. They'll have some signage at the games and things like that, which I think is important to get the word out. That does not mean the university wants to shut us down and doesn't want people to join Carolina Rise. I think we've got a good program for people, and I think that especially for individuals and small businesses, this is a way to be part of something special, no matter what your budget is. And I think it will grow into something that is sustainable and special. We do fund Park Avenue. That is a new thing for us. That is a pretty big expense. But they do get student athletes at South Carolina tremendous deals. You see this thing with Juice Wells. You see the Nick Harbor thing that's happening with him. Some of Spencer Rattler's stuff. I mean, that's all Park Avenue, and that's big time because, they don't charge the players a commission. In other words, if you go out and get $100,000 deal and you're a player at Carolina, you keep that. Whereas other schools, if you have an agent, whatever, there's probably a 30% fee. And Park Avenue, they're the best of the best. They have connections to brands that no collective in the South Carolina markets can be able to touch. I can't call up Chipotle and say, "Hey, why don't you give this guy a deal?" I don't have that kind of sizzle, but they do, and they have a laundry list of professional clients. I mean, it's just like Jerry Maguire. I mean, that's basically what it is. You got Jerry Maguire working for you if you are a South Carolina student athlete because of Park Avenue. And so that's part of it too. So when you're a member with us, it funds Park Avenue. It funds baseball in a lot of ways. It funds a lot of stuff for football behind the scenes. It funds some men's basketball and hopefully some other sports here pretty soon. And, it's a volunteer organization. We don't have professional infrastructure and all that. I'm primarily the guy that does it. And people may say, well, you're not qualified. Well, I'll put it this way. Maybe I am to you guys, just a website owner, but I was on the tail end of a sale of $100 million company and helped get the value there at the end. And I was on the ground floor of another one that sold for $75 million. So I must have a brain on my head on my shoulders, right? So I must be pretty smart and be pretty competent at things. That's not to mention the bigspur.com and the market leading website I've built there. So I think I know a little bit about memberships and selling memberships online, which is what it is, Chris, and all that. If somebody wants to question that, but I like our volunteer approach. I don't, I have a job with the Big Spur, a site owner there, and make good money. And this is just a way to give back to make sure that South Carolina's players get taken care of with whatever little we can do. As far as what people should do, where should you give your money? Where should you join? You should join wherever you're comfortable joining. You should join Garnet Trust if you want. You should join us if you want. You should withhold your money if you want. It's your money, and I totally respect that. What I do is probably join both. If I were just kind of out there in Gamecock land and wanted to help, I just kind of split the difference because where we both have kind of the same goal, we do take care of different needs within the whole scope of Carolina athletics. You're not giving money to Garnet Trust and it's going to the same place that it will if it goes to Carolina Rise. And that's another part of it I really want to emphasize is we do different things. We kind of have different business models and stuff like that. So, you're helping really two different types of entities when it comes to the NIL thing at Carolina. And, it's $10 a month or so, I mean, we even take one-time membership fees of $10. If you want to just give $10, you can do it and all that. So we love people like that because that means they're giving what they or that's what they can afford and that's what they want to contribute. So long story short, our goal is to continue to build a broad, massive, Gamecock filled, talking thousands of members. That's a sustainable NIL entity, no matter what law changes, no matter what rules change, no matter what. That's our goal, is to build something like a rock solid foundation for this athletic program that's been so good to me over the years. It's time for me to get back, and I don't have a problem spearheading it. So I hope that answers the questions. I know that's a long way around to that final sentence, but that's kind of what the deal is there.
No, yeah, JC, and we needed that. Again, I get tons of questions every single day, and like I said, let's go straight to the source and get the expert analysis on it, or breakdown, if you will. Let me ask you this. Biggest difference in collectives versus, like, say, the Gamecock Club at South Carolina, IPTAY at Clemson. I'm imagining the biggest difference is that, like, Gamecock Club, that money, that booster money is going directly to the university, not to the players. Is that an accurate representation or accurate depiction of it?
That's very important. And I want to say this too. I've never encouraged people not to give to the Gamecock Club, and I never will. I don't think it's an either or. I don't think you need to pull away money from the Gamecock Club to participate in a collective and kind of do what your part or whatever. But no money. And that's the thing. That's a big that's misconception number 2 about all this is, why doesn't the athletic department do something? Why doesn't the Gamecock Club do something? Why can't I just give to the Gamecock Club and tack it on? It's because they can't. It's against the law, and it's against the policies of the NCAA. And Texas A&M was going to do that, and they announced it and had a big to-do. And Ross Bjork, their AD, got up there and swashbuckled himself and was like, we're just going to do it no matter what because Texas state law says we can. Well, yesterday they dissolved that. They said, well, we can't because the NCAA, yeah, you could do it, and they can't put you on probation, but they're a private organization, and if they want to not invite you to their championships, they can do that too. I mean, they can say, hey, we don't want you at the championships if you're not going to play by our rules. So that happened there. I hope one day it is kind of all mixed in, and all that. But right now, Garnet Trust, Park Avenue, Carolina Rise, they are all separate entities that collectively fund the NIL operation in South Carolina. So that's basically what it is. You can't, if you want the NIL situation to be better at South Carolina, it's not coming from the Gamecock Club. It's not coming from the administration. It's not coming from anywhere. But these entities that are good for fans to get involved with, because, hey, for the first time ever as a fan, you have a direct financial impact on your roster, as far as players go, because big NIL deals attract recruits. They do. I'm not saying you now. Let me be clear. You don't go offer it to them, but they look at. Everybody knows the numbers, and everybody knows kind of what the possibilities are, and you want those possibilities to be as good as possible. And so, whereas you can go give and build a building or help get a brick out in front of the stadium with your name on it, get parking, get tickets, whatever, help build fund scholarships, all that good stuff. That's great, but that's all very ancillary to what impacts winning the most, which is players. And this helps players. It keeps players. It gets players in. It's dramatically important right now with, unfortunately, where we're at in college sports. Philosophically, you ask me, I wish it all go away. But, hey, it didn't. So what? Now what? To quote Will Muschamp, that's it's reality now, baby. You just got to keep going. You cannot sit there and go, oh, I don't believe in it. Well, I'm sorry. That's just how it is. That's just how it's nobody's fault. It's just how it is, and it's a need. So that's my little pitch there. Is that philosophically, I wish it was not that way. I wish there was some other way to compensate players, or if it was NIL in its truest form, but it's not. And so Carolina's got to do what's best for the Gamecocks, just like everybody else.
JC, let's talk a little bit of recruiting, because I felt like this went under the radar because of some of the madness that took place last weekend. But South Carolina did pick up a commitment for the class of 2026. Quarterback Landon Duckworth, 6'3", 190 pounds, out of the state of Alabama. He chose the Gamecocks over has an impressive offer list: Arkansas, Florida, Mississippi State, Nebraska, TCU, A&M. Talk a little bit about Duckworth. Obviously, it's so far out, and who knows? I mean, it's a long time till, pen meets paper, if you will. But your thoughts on the commitment and just what it means for the Gamecocks too. He went as far as to say that South Carolina told me I was their number one priority at the quarterback position in the class. Overall thoughts on the commitment as a whole?
I mean, I'm not a huge fan of taking guys this early, but I do think Deshaun Watson committed as a rising junior. Did he not? Or rising? Wait a minute, this kid's a rising sophomore. Deshaun committed pretty early to Clemson. Is this kid Deshaun Watson? I don't know. It's way too early for me to tell. I do know he's 6'3", 190. I do know he can throw the ball. I do know he looks more like a senior out there playing than a sophomore. I'd be a little concerned. He's from the state of Alabama, because if he blows up and he's like the best player in that state, I mean, I'm just saying, historically, Alabama kids stay in Alabama. And you do have Hugh Freeze sitting there at Auburn now. It's not like the Harsin years. So I would be a little concerned about that. Is he good? Yes. Are Dowell Loggins and Shane Beamer right in saying number one guy in that class? Absolutely. He's a stud player. And it's good they got a commitment from him this early. We'll see if it sticks. I hope that it does. And he is a guy, you kind of bring him in. And I don't know who the 2025 quarterback will be. Kind of hoping it's Deuce Knight out of Mississippi, because he's a really good player. And I like that name, Deuce Knight. But, you've got Reno in 2024. If you get Knight or whoever, 25, and then this kid in 26, that continues to stack good quarterbacks, man. And that's one thing that's kind of been crazy. I don't know that on paper, Steve Spurrier recruited that well at quarterback on paper at South Carolina. Weren't a lot of highly rated guys coming in here to play for the head ball coach. Will Muschamp did recruit a lot of highly rated quarterbacks. Not a lot of them didn't pan out, right? Well, Beamer has taken that to the next level. And so all of a sudden, South Carolina is quarterback rich. And it's amazing that that's happened through the years, but it is what it is. But I do think it's a good pickup. Do I attach a ton of significance to it at this early date, other than symbolically it's really good and he's a good player? No. But, hey, you end up holding on to him and he ends up being really good. It's definitely worth taking him this early.
JC, let's get to fall camp, my man, and talk some actual football happening happening on the field. The Gamecocks are preparing for the season opener against Charlotte, North Carolina, which will take place in 23 days, I would imagine, whether it's today, tomorrow, sometime very soon, whether it was yesterday. The pads are on, pads are popping, which means jobs are starting to be won. Let's first start, JC, with the big piece of news that came out, I believe it was 2 days ago. Luke Doty taking reps with wide receivers. What can you tell us about the latest with him? Obviously, the journey with Luke Doty's been somewhat similar to Kerryon Joyner, a guy that switched positions, and he's played receiver before. In 2021, he was QB1, backup quarterback last year. Now we hear rumors that, he's running around with the receivers, but he's still QB2. And I think there's another layer of intrigue to this because Lenoris Sellers is on this roster, and a lot of people feel like he's the quarterback of the future. He's the guy. What can you tell us? Is it just something as simple as he was just running around and running some routes and just kind of goofing off, or is there some real legs to the fact that he might be playing wide receiver this year?
I'd give it some legs. And this is the second staff. I mean, this is not, 2020. They didn't have any receivers. So I think everybody was kind of hanging their hat on Luke Doty being, maybe part of the rotation as a true freshman. And he's got some ability there. I mean, for sure. I think you always want to do right by your players in terms of being honest with them about where they fit in, what could happen in the future, what could happen right now. And look, no mistake about it. Something, if Spencer Rattler happened to go down, probably at any point in the season, definitely the first month of the season, will Lenore Sellers play? Yes. Who will be the first quarterback off the bench? Probably Doty. But you do look at the upside Sellers has, and you look at how quickly he's adjusted, and you look at like where he's at. By the end of the year, is that going to be the same way? Is Doty still going to give you the best chance? If it's a long-term thing and there's basically going to be a new starting quarterback for the rest of the year, does Doty give you the best chance to win your last, or would Sellers be that guy? That's a hard question to answer. So what I think it is it's some insurance for Luke because he obviously wants to stay at South Carolina. He obviously wants to get on the field. That could be a position he ends up thriving at. I mean, he's fast, he's quick, he's got good hands. He played receiver younger. I don't know that it's his best position because I still think he's a good quarterback, especially in certain systems. But, if he wants to stay at South Carolina and you do have this incredible talent behind you, and then you do have Tanner Bailey too sitting there, maybe you start looking around going, well, I still want to get on the field. What could I do to do that? Maybe playing receivers that. So that's I know that wasn't the headline everybody wanted to see. Doty working at receiver because it brings back some bad memories. But I think with the way Carolina's receiver core is this year, they're, if he plays, it's going to be because he's really good enough to get on the field and beat some of these other guys out, not just because they have to play him there. Whereas in 2020, they had nobody but Shi Smith basically.
JC, let's stick with fall camp on the offensive side. And let me also preface by saying this, JC. Admittedly, I take most of what we hear out of fall camp with a grain of salt because, as you know right now, like everybody's undefeated. Everybody's good. Everybody's, it kind of goes back to the Steve Spurrier thing when he joked and said, you never heard a coach say this. And he's like, receivers are dropping balls. We got grass stains on our jerseys because our defensive backs can't stay upright. Quarterbacks can't hit the broadside of a barn. Like, nobody's saying that right now, right? But from what you've heard on the offensive side of the football, anything stand out in regards to maybe Spencer Rattler? We've heard the offensive line is maybe they're nastier than years past. Of course, the Kerryon Joyner at RB1, that whole factor. Nicholas Harbor is a true freshman getting adjusted. We saw the video of Joshua Simon go up over Jelon Kilgore, make a fantastic catch. Has anything on the offensive side of the football stood out to this point? Again, they're getting the pads on, so jobs are really going to start to be won now. But have you heard anything interesting over the first couple of practices or so on the offensive side at this point?
I think it's more on offense, Chris. I think it's more that Kerryon looks pretty natural at running back. And that's been something that's kind of been a work in progress, but a quick work in progress. I was encouraged with what I heard about Mario Anderson Jr. the other day. My colleague Tony Morrell on the Big Spur had a little something about him, and it backed up what I'd heard from a person I had a conversation with. Xavier Legette continues to be a guy that impresses, and they love the tight ends. I would say Elijah Caldwell, but man, we've been hearing about Elijah Caldwell since the summer. It's probably not that I've heard his name, it's that I keep hearing it over and over. And usually that's a good sign. When it's a situation like you hear this one guy did one good thing one time, and then you don't hear from him again, that's kind of a fluff. Oh, well, worth passing along, but it doesn't matter. The guys that you hear about constantly, and Elijah's one of them, are guys that end up being like J.C. Horn or Nick Warre in the preseason. They're the guys that are Brian Edwards when he was a freshman. They are definitely going to play and maybe start. I don't know if I'd say that about Caldwell just yet, but I do think he'll be in the rotation. That quite frankly doesn't surprise me, given that he's from Northwestern and really well coached in high school and good hands and all that. So basically, the offense is what the line. Vershawn Lee is a name that I keep hearing, but he's going to be the center, but could play other spots. I think Sidney Fugar is a guy that's had a good summer, a transfer from Western Illinois. But it's just really going to be up to those veterans up front, though, Chris, playing the best ball that they've played since they've been at Carolina. And look, it hadn't always been good enough, but there's been times where it's been good. So they have to be consistent game to game. The meanness, toughness. Look, I'm hearing that out of Chapel Hill right now. Oh, they're done being called soft up there. Yeah, we won't know that till the games. But practice, maybe they are being a little nastier. But I think we'll see that. They just need to play the best ball they can. And finally, to your point about tidbits out of practice, and I don't think I've stressed this enough well with my crowd on the Big Spur or not, because we have a lot of practice tidbits. But what I'd say is this: practice coverage essentially is to tell you and inform you who's going to be playing for the Gamecocks this year. In other words, who's going to be the first team right tackle? Who's going to play this? Who's going to two deep? Who can get in the mix? When you say somebody's doing well at practice, that's kind of what you're getting at theoretically. It's not like, hey, this guy's going to run for 300 yards against Georgia, because that's impossible to tell. I mean, that's because you're not watching. When you're us and you're covering one team, you're not watching everybody else on a daily basis. You kind of get intel here and there, but that's it. So whenever we say something good about somebody doing something in practice, at least from my standpoint, please know that just means in the scope of them competing for a starting job at Carolina, not that or hey, maybe they look quicker or something like that. That's not a predictor of success once the season gets here.
Now, JC, same thing on the flip side, defensively. Anything stand out? I mean, I've heard some good things about Pup Howard. Does not look like a true freshman. Anything else that jumps out to you, really? I mean, I know the offense is the big question mark, and so that's what people are going to talk about more than anything. But has anything stood out to you from what you've heard defensively? And again, before you put the pads on, especially for those guys, I don't know how much you can really learn. But has anything jumped out at this point?
Just the overall speed of the defense. I think people, from what I've been told, it's a faster defense, and that's to be expected, man, because you got two pretty good safeties sitting back there that are just sophomores. They're still young players, but they're much more comfortable than they were, and you saw that as the season went on and on and on. You got two corners that are new starters, but they're pretty good players that have played a lot of snaps, especially Marcellus Dial. You got a guy like David Spalding in his third year, hopefully at the nickel, or Keenan Nelson, who came on at the end of last year. You got Jordan Strawn back, Tonka Hemingway, Boogie Huntley, TJ Sanders. All those guys have been around for a while. Jasus Jeer, I think, from Syracuse has a chance to be pretty good. Tyreek Johnson is 127 years old, and he may have his best season or his only season of really producing as a Gamecock. They think he may have saved his best for last. I mean, that's crazy. That kid was in Will Muschamp's first full recruiting class at South Carolina, or that man, not a kid anymore, right? But I look at it and I'm like, well, there's a chance they'll take a step up just because of the increased athleticism at linebacker, what I think will be a better coached, more athletic, more disruptive defensive line on the interior, to the two safeties being a year older. I mean, I think it could be. I mean, they got to get at some point they got to stop the run better, right? And you said it; it's a big year for Clayton White in that regard. And they have to keep getting the turnovers. I mean, this system's designed to kind of get turnovers, and so if they can do those things, improve against the run, keep the turnovers, pressure the quarterback because they're going to need to do that. They'll have a pretty good year on defense. But the one thing I just keep hearing though out of fall camp is this is a faster group. This is a different type of group, especially in the linebacker position.
Finally, JC, on fall camp, Nicholas Harbor is a guy, that name continues to come up over and over again about his transition from high school ball to SEC football, playing the wide receiver position full-time. What can you tell us about, some of the successes and maybe some of the challenges he's facing early on? Obviously, again, learning the nuances of the receiver position. What do you think it means for his early playing time and how soon we should expect to see him making an impact for the Gamecocks?
Well, one of the reports said he, is having trouble getting off the line, but he kind of fixed that. Started using his strength a little more. So he's 241 pounds, Chris. I mean, there shouldn't be very many DBs jamming him. And from what I've heard, he's a pretty fast learner. I mean, we all know the speed. We all know the size. We all know he's going to be intriguing. I think the hands thing got way blown out of proportion because of maybe some ones at the Under Armour game that he should have had, and he didn't get to them. And I learned a lesson evaluating that way at the Under Armour game. Jameis Winston, when he was a senior, he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn during practice, right? Something like 8 for 28 one day, just awful. And so Jerry Hamilton and I from 24/7 Sports, we decided there wasn't going to be a 5-star quarterback that year, right? And so we dropped him to like one spot outside of 5-star. And Damian Craig, who was quarterback's coach at Florida State at the time, texted me and was livid about it, right? And I was just like, oh, sorry, man, we didn't. And I learned at that point, those practices are good to tell some things, but don't make any dramatic moves because that can come back to bite you, especially with a guy that like Jameis Winston, who was proven and all that good stuff, and who probably should have been #1 player in the country that year, by the way. I think we have Myles Garrett. But I learned my lesson there. Nick Harbor, when you watch him on film, it's clear that he's not like Featherstone from Necessary Roughness and Stone Hands, and he doesn't fight the ball. He's just, is he a natural pass catcher? Like Shi Smith, for example, natural pass catcher. That kind of Juice Wells, natural pass catcher. Alshon, those guys. No, I wouldn't say he's naturally an elite pass catcher, but he doesn't. There's plenty of guys with his level of hands that are in the NFL playing receiver. I mean, it's not something to circle and be alarmed about. And even if he goes out and drops the first one, guys, which I know that's coming, he'll drop one and y'all come back. Oh, your hands, blah, blah. No, just give him a little bit. Remember, Deebo Samuel dropped a bunch of passes, and that one year everybody dropped him, and they're all in the NFL now. So that's it. And people used to ask me what position Harbor would play, Chris, and I said touchdown. Because I just don't know who's going to catch him if he gets loose or gets behind a D. Imagine trying to track that guy down. That's going to be tough.
JC, of all the freshmen that you've heard about during fall camp to this point, who would you say against UNC is most primed to have a kind of a breakout performance? Is there one guy you think that you're like, this dude is going to take the league by storm as soon as he gets the field?
I'm going Pup Howard with that, or Jelon Kilgore, and that's weird because I do think Debo Williams will start, and it'll either be Stone Blanton or Mo Kaba against North Carolina. But I think Pup's going to play a lot, and you're going to hear from him, so to speak. And then with the two safeties coming back, Peyton Williams is back there too, and you can play Spalding back there too. It's kind of hard to say, this freshman safety is going to be good. I don't know if it'll be on special teams. I don't know if it'll be on defense. I just think you're going to hear from Jelon Kilgore right away. So those two guys on the defensive side of the ball. Offense, maybe Elijah Caldwell? Maybe not. It's a pretty veteran group up there. I think you're more likely to hear from Big Tree Babalade or Marquis Anderson early on than maybe some of the other guys. And it's not that they're not good. It's just Carolina's got players back. And that caveat, of course, means that Rattler's still the starter and Lenora Sellers is not, in their plan. So we'll see sort of what happens with all that. But those would be my guys right now.
JC Sherwood of the Big Spur of Inside the Gamecocks. They do a fantastic job. JC, appreciate you guys having me on the airwaves this morning. Keep up the great work. By the way, congratulations on the billboards that have taken Charlotte, North Carolina by storm. I got a text during the show, asked JC about the billboards. So congrats to you guys, and that's awesome, man. It's incredible stuff. Spreading the awareness. I love it.
Oh, yeah. Brand awareness, bud. You know that well, my friend. You know that well. So we certainly enjoy being on with you, man. And it's almost here, so we'll talk soon.
Yeah, man. We'll talk to you next week, JC. I appreciate you.
See you, buddy.
Yeah, man. Take care. Great stuff from JC Sherwood. A lot of valuable updates there on fall camp. Guys, we're going to jump into a quick break. On the other side, we will get into your questions, your comments, your calls, and our Q&A Power Hour here on this Thursday. You're tuned in to The Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is brought to you by our friends at Carolina Cigars. Carolina Cigars has been in operation since 2008, recently taken over by the Peterson family in 2020. Whether you're new to the cigar scene or whether you've been enjoying cigars your entire life, Carolina Cigars has the expertise and knowledge to make your visit to their shop enjoyable. Stop by for a fine cigar and experience their classic cigar lounge where people come together, share conversations, and become friends. So if you're into cigars and you're on Hilton Head Island, you really do need to go by and see them. They offer same-day shipping nationwide, free delivery island-wide for weddings and all special occasions. They're also proud to offer premium cigars at 9 outside humidor locations around Hilton Head Island, and they have special events throughout the year as well. They want to talk to you. They want to engage. They want to share with you their cigar selection they're very proud of and their beautiful cigar lounge. When you're in the Low Country, there's only one place for cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, and there's only one place I get my cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, Hilton Head Island's premier cigar merchant. Come and share your passion. It's all here at Carolina Cigars. Give them a follow on Instagram at Carolina_cigars, or give them a call today at 843-681-8600. That's 843-681-8600. Smoke them if you got them, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya. Daily Crow is also sponsored by Rhine Law Firm, LLC, principally managed by James R. Rhine Jr., located at 1350 Ashley River Road, Suite 650, Charleston, South Carolina, 29407, serving the greater Charleston area.
Muscle doggy ho, doggy ho.
All right, guys, are back here on this Thursday, August the 10th, 2023. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Of course, I keep doing this. I keep forgetting in our Q&A Power Hour to set up the phone line. I mean, we need like Robbie Davis, Austin, others to be able to call in. Here we go. Boom. Up. Almost. We're almost there. All right. Good to go. Now we are ready to rock in our Q&A Power Hour. Taking your questions, comments, calls. 843-790-3377. That's 843-790-3377 here on this Thursday, August the 10th. Again, I want to say thank you to JC Sherbert, Mark Ryan as well. Both of our guests. I know we went into the Q&A Power Hour just a bit, but we had to get our guests in there. Really great stuff from both those gentlemen. And again, appreciate them taking the time. Always a pleasure to chat with them. Also great to get fall camp tidbits and talk about some actual football on the field. What I think is really, really interesting is hearing JC, and we've seen it from others, talk about Nicholas Harbor and the adjustment that he's having to make to college football. Told you guys weeks ago that there was going to be an adjustment period, learning the nuances of the wide receiver position. This kid has things you cannot coach. He's got size, he's got speed, he's got athleticism. That goes without saying. But it's not as simple as just, you're a great athlete, you can play wide receiver. Like, there's a skill set to it that I think he's going to have to develop. And so don't be surprised if I think they'll find creative ways to get him the football early. But in regards to being an elite wide receiver, I think that's going to take some time. I think it's going to be a couple of weeks. I think it's going to be mid-season, later in the season, until you really see him flourish and begin to tap into his real potential at the wide receiver position. So do not be surprised if Nicholas Harbor is not quite on the field as much as maybe as some of us expected, but I still think he'll make a big-time contribution for South Carolina this season. Austin Gregory says overtime today. Yeah, I'm good on that, Austin. I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. 3 hours is plenty, my man. We got other things to do, other things to get to. We'll wrap it up at 3 o'clock. We may take no break the final rest of the show. So either way, sometimes the Q&A Power Hour is an hour 15. Sometimes it's 40 minutes. Rock and roll with the punches. I know you guys are understanding. So either way, again, I want to hear from you. 843-790-3377. That's 843-790-3377. Braddock 843, you're going to have Garcia back on again this time of year for some Monday morning quarterback. Braddock, if we do, it will be a rare occurrence. It's not going to be every single week. Steven is very, very busy with the birth of his latest child just a couple of months ago. And, we've got Mark Rogers, the voice of college football. And, the Steven Garcia stuff, it was great last year, but just want to switch things up a little bit. And so I don't see the Steven Garcia thing being a weekly occurrence by any stretch. Let's jump to the phone lines here.
Call from
Robbie Davis, Zaxby's Hall of Famer.
Robbie, what's going on, my friend? How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I just wanted to call in and let you know that I will have my predictions ready to go on Monday.
Okay, on Monday. I'm looking forward to that, man. Excited to hear what you have to say.
So I just wanted to call in and let you know coming up on the 18th. I sent you correctly.
Mm-hmm.
I think the location of the show is in the poster, but I sent it to you like a couple weeks ago.
Okay, gotcha. I cannot wait to hear, Rob.
No problem. All right, man. Have a great rest of your day and have a great weekend.
Yeah, man. Go Cox. You as well. Appreciate you, Robbie. Great stuff from Robbie Davis. Maybe the shortest Robbie Davis call in this show's history. About 1 minute and 15 seconds is what we got there from Robbie Davis. Let's see. Getting into your questions from earlier in the show. Brian Dean says, prediction game 1, South Carolina 31, North Carolina 14. Again, would love to take that. Lot of NFL preseason this weekend. I see that. You guys updating me with the schedule. Brian Dean, that side will be elite. Clayton White's defense will be top 10. The swag is back. Brian, from your lips to God's ears, my friend. I hope you are right. I hope you are right. Let's see. Travi, what's going on? Brandon M. said, let's get it. Brian Dean, Gamecocks over everything. There you go, Chris. Idea for a new shirt. I like it. All right, let's get back to the phone lines here.
Call from
Peyton.
Peyton, what's going on, man? How are you?
Good. How about yourself, Chris? What do you say, partner?
I'm doing fantastic, man. I appreciate you asking. What's going on?
Nothing much. So earlier on in the show, I heard you say, you're kind of tired of talking about all the off-season stuff, and you don't want to get repetitive, and you're ready to talk some ball. So I called in to ask about maybe some matchup previews at UNC. I'm not that well versed on UNC's roster, so I'm curious. What are some areas that maybe we could expose come game day?
Yeah, for sure, Peyton. And I'll have specific names for you the week of that game because admittedly, we did our UNC team preview, but I don't have all the names off the top of my head. But, I first look at, we talk key matchups and such. You got to first look at the South Carolina defensive line, specifically the edges, getting pressure on Drake May. I mean, we talked about that earlier. Of course, we're talking defensive line today and the importance of it. And, obviously in the SEC, stopping the run and rushing the quarterback, that's what you make a living off of doing. It is imperative that South Carolina find ways to get pressure on Drake May because he's a guy that, no matter what you think about, they lose a couple of their top weapons from last year on the outside. At the wide receiver position, they've got, question marks in the running game, similar to South Carolina. But Drake May's a real dude. And if you let him sit back there and he has time to throw 4 or 5 seconds, he's going to pick you apart. So Jordan Strawn, Jatius Gear, these dudes, Desmond Umezulu, Brian Thomas Jr., Terrell Dawkins, these guys off the edge, they need to be really good in that ballgame. I think for South Carolina, on the offensive side, I look at their offensive line. Giving Spencer Rattler time to throw and operate and generating some sort of a run push. And I think the Gamecocks will be able, Peyton, to take advantage. I think that South Carolina on the line of scrimmage will look much better than maybe they even are because I don't know that UNC has the bodies up front to really expose South Carolina. So there's that. I mean, of course, you can go to the storyline of Spencer Rattler and what he does for you and, the quarterback battle between May and Rattler and, what that looks like. So, there's a ton of different intriguing storylines. And as we get closer to kickoff, Peyton, we'll dive much more in depth to those. But, certainly a game I think we should expect to be somewhat of a higher scoring offensive shootout. And, it could be one of those games, last team with the ball wins. It very well could be one of those type of games.
Yeah, it seems like it. And to talk both sides of the line of scrimmage, some rumblings coming out of fall camp that our O-line group is nastier than years prior, And you've been saying weeks prior to this that UNC is not going to have the level of the SEC caliber defensive line play that we're going to be expecting for the most of the season. And hopefully, we're, with all the question marks up front, we're not going to be exposed necessarily week one. But to talk to the nastiness, I'll say, man, if you got a group of ragtag guys that will live and die in that foxhole with those guys next to you, and will just keep coming forward and fighting and fighting and fighting.
that'll wear a D line out, man. And if you put those big bodies on linebackers trying to fill holes, and it'll deter a lot of those backers. And I don't think the nastiness factor should be understated, because I think that'll have an impact come game time. But for the defensive line aspect, I think like you said, I think limiting Drake May's pocket time is going to be really, really crucial. I think we definitely need to keep it under 3 seconds. We can't give him more than 3 seconds, or like you said, he can pick any team apart in the country if you give him more than 3 seconds. But I just think if we got to stay in his face, we got to be creative with blitz packages, and it's definitely good to hear JC say that this linebacking core is faster than years prior, because that makes for open spaces closing very quickly, and open field tackles should be expected to be made, especially with guys that can close distances as good as this group supposedly can. So I think the matchups are going to be very interesting, man.
Yeah, and we'll talk more early next week, Peyton, about the linebacker position. You read between the lines of some things that Clayton White has said in the preseason, and I think there's reason to believe he really, really likes this linebacker core more than the guys he had last year. I mean, call it for what it is. I think it's not so hard to spot that. And, to your point about the offensive line having a nastiness, I think a guy like Nick Gargiulo brings that, coming over from Yale. Again, I said this, and it's not to be dismissive of anything coming out of fall camp or whatever, but I really do I want to see him put the pads on, and I want to see it on the field. I mean, I've heard a lot of good things about the O-line over the last couple of years. Last year, year one of Beamer, and it hadn't panned out. You know what I mean? So I think what JC said is very telling also, that, South Carolina's offensive line, it kind of reminds me of the Yardcocks bullpen in 2022. And I'm not saying the results are going to be the same, but you might recall that bullpen, it was a bunch of veteran guys who, for that group to have success, you needed them to have their best years in Garnet and Black. You wanted to believe that they could be elite dudes and that it was in there, and they just hadn't performed at that level yet. That's kind of what this O-line is. That's kind of what this offensive line is. It's like, you got some veteran guys. You got some dudes who have been around the block and have played. The problem is, Peyton, they haven't played very good football. And so you need a couple of those dudes. They don't all have to hit, but you need a couple of them to have their best seasons they've ever had at South Carolina for this group to realistically improve.
Yeah, and to add to your Gargiulo point, I think he potentially might could turn into that cornerstone guy up front. And being an offensive lineman, you feed off of your guys being, having that attitude of, I'm not going to be beaten, and you get sort of an extra edge, especially when you hear all the media talking over the summer about how, this I don't know how it's going to work, I don't know if it's going to pan out, this and this. I mean, these guys are listening to that too. All these guys are hearing how they're underrated and how they don't have SEC experience or they don't have these big game experiences. But if a pissed off bunch of O linemen, I think can prove very helpful for us. But like you said, man, it's never a done deal until we see it.
Yep.
But I think definitely some promising words. It eased my concern a little bit, but I still think, like you said, the question marks are still there. They still remain either way until kickoff. Yeah.
For sure. We got to see it on the field, man. But, again, there's hope, there's promise, and that's the time of year it is, man, where optimism runs wild and everybody's undefeated in fall camp. And once the ball gets spotted, and, we'll see what happens. Peyton, I appreciate you taking the time to call in, man. Always a pleasure to chat with you.
Absolutely, Chris. Thanks. Spurs Up Show. Go Cox, buddy.
Go Cox, man. Appreciate it, Peyton. Let's jump to this other call here.
Call from
Chase the Train.
What's going on, man? How are you?
Hey, Chris, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. I apologize we couldn't get to you sooner, man. What's going on?
No problem, man. First time calling in, but we actually worked together for like your last week in Charlotte. So I'm good to talk to you again. What I was wanting to bring up is Joyner. Because there's a lot of conversation about like how good he will be at a running back. I think it's going to be fine enough because he's just a game player. But yesterday I actually went back and watched the Duke's Mayo Bowl, and I don't think that people are really giving him credit on how much he will be able to put in a wrinkle of like maybe one or two throws a game to keep people off center. So I just wanted to get your comments about that, of him potentially throwing in a couple of runs to make up for anything that's not straight ahead his running back ability.
I mean, I think the possibilities are endless, man. You've got a guy that's comfortable throwing the football, and what you can do with Dekevion Joyner, it is fascinating, right? Because again, it's a guy that's played quarterback. It's not his first rodeo back there, so because of that, he's got great vision, I think, as well. And we're all talking about what he can do in regards to just being a true pure running back. But certainly, like you mentioned, there is and you're not just going to be running trick plays every game all the time, like every other series, but you have that in your back pocket, and I'm sure we will see it at some point. I'm sure we're going to see South Carolina, whether it's to kind of kick things off with a bang against UNC, or it's the Georgia game, and when you're kind of throwing the kitchen sink at the Dogs, or maybe it's in Knoxville. Whenever it is, I think you will definitely see some trickeration with Dekevion Joyner throwing the football, maybe faking that he's going to throw and running. Maybe a run and a throwback to Spencer Rattler and a pass downfield. You're going to see something. I think they're going to get really creative in the way they use him. And, I'm excited to see it, because that's anytime you're in a position like South Carolina where it's like you have a bunch of weapons on the offensive side, one of the big question marks is, how do you distribute the football? You have so many weapons, right? Dekevion Joyner, but there's also Juice Wells, there's Trey Knox, there's Xavier Legette, there's Amarian Brown, there's Juju McDowell, Mario Anderson, all your other guys, Joshua Simon. There's only one football. There's a limited number of touches. How do they distribute those? I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Dowell Loggins handles that.
No, absolutely. Again, just didn't hear a lot of people bringing it up, and I think it's going to add a really, really large wrinkle in the game. It's not necessarily using him as straight running back. Again, like you said, he's not running trick plays every series, every other series, just maybe once, twice a game, just to keep the defense guessing. And especially with that early game against Georgia, when they're breaking in some new talent, throw some stuff at them that they hadn't seen. But, man, it's great talking to you again, Chris. You keep up the good work.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for the call. Great stuff.
All right. Bye.
Yeah, man. Take care. Wildy said that we worked together my last week in Charlotte. I'm assuming he's talking Spectrio was the old employer. What a place. And I'll never forget, too, this is a side note, I'll never forget when I left there, the manager, sales manager, I think like VP of sales, whoever he was at the time, was very, very, very sarcastically, I'll just say, wished me good luck with that podcast thing you do. And sure enough, here we are. So funny how everything works. Let's jump to the phone lines here.
Call from
Hunter, what's up, man? How are you?
I'm good, man. Get food and all, just hungry self. I just got off work and I just tuned in. I didn't know if y'all were obviously talking about stopping the run and all. So how do you think they're going to do on stopping the run this year? Do you think they're going to do a lot better last year, or?
Yeah, so we talked about this a couple of weeks ago when I talked defense, but in regards to your point, stopping the run, I think we will make a slight improvement. I do. I do think there will be an improvement. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that South Carolina is going to finish top 10 in the SEC even, but it's about taking baby steps. And I don't think South Carolina – here, listen, you gave up 198 yards per game rushing a season ago. I don't think you can be much worse. I know you lose Zach Pickens.
I think we came last in the defense last year, I think.
Yeah, Carolina was around 12 or 13 in rush defense, but you lose Zach Pickens, but you add Elijah Davis out of JUCO, and I think Tonka Hemingway and Alex Huntley are ready to fill in the void, take the next step. You lose Jordan Birch, but you added Jatius Gear. I think South Carolina did a good job addressing in the transfer portal, at least a good a job as you could ask for addressing those deficiencies. You lose Gilbert Edmond, Terrell Dawkins, Tyreek Johnson. You need to take that next step, and you also need Jordan Strawn to return from his injury and fill in that void. I think the linebacker core, though, which, again, Hunter, we'll get into Monday, Tuesday next week, I think that's the key for this defense and why I think they'll be better at stopping the run. So I'm very intrigued by the front seven. Again, you lose 6 of 8 in regards to snap count in your front seven, 6 of your top 8, if you will. But I think South Carolina, with some fresh blood, new guys in there, I think it could lead to new results. So I think they'll be a little bit better. I'm not going to say they make some huge improvement, but I think they'll take a step in the right direction.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll see some improvement with the North Carolina game, obviously. But I'm mostly excited about seeing Puff Howard, obviously, and Nick Harbor, of course. Nick Harbor is one of the guys I'm mostly excited about.
Well, I'll tell you this, Hunter. I know you're a guy. I know you're a guy that's picking 10-2 or 11-1 and 12-0. That ain't gonna happen if you can't stop the run, my guy. I can tell you that right now.
I like to play around every now and then. I mean, yeah, hopefully, sometime soon we'll go 12-0 like Georgia. Will be another Georgia team, but I'm not too sure if it's probably going to happen this year. So
hopefully sooner rather than later, Hunter. Hopefully sooner rather than later, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. One more question. So do you know when we're going to see like any media videos of like practices and stuff like that? You know how they used to do that last year?
Yeah, it depends on when the media availability is for practice. I know they have a scrimmage on Saturday that's at 3:15 in the afternoon. Shane Beamer will speak after that. I don't know if there'll be actually video of practice or what have you. And it feels like year after year there's less of that because these coaches are they're getting more and more and more, anal about people seeing, whatever the game plan might be or whatever tricks they have up their sleeve. So I don't know about actual practice footage, but, Shane Beamer will speak Saturday. We'll get some updates and just kind of go from there. So.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. That's all I need.
I appreciate it, Hunter. Thank you so much for the call, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, man. Great stuff from Hunter. And guys, make sure when you call in, you are speaking into your phone clearly so that everyone can hear you. Our good friend Barrett Salee dropped his, let's see. Okay, excuse me. It was Jerry Palm. Jerry Palm dropped his college football bowl projections. His playoff is Georgia at 1, Michigan 2, Alabama 3, and Ohio State at number 4. Let's see his full bowl projections. Wow, okay. So Jerry Palm has South Carolina taking on TCU in the Texas Bowl. That would be very, very interesting. That game will be played in Houston, Texas. Would anybody be willing to make the trip to Houston? Okay, so it's Chase Warren that was with me in Charlotte. He said, yeah, the manager was horrible. I'm not going to put him on full blast on this show, but yeah, it was an interesting time to say the least. Cody says, here's an interesting thought. Do we feel like last year was a waste of Spencer Rattler's eligibility, knowing what we know now about Satterfield, despite those last 2 wins, or was it all worth it? Cody, go rewatch the replays of Tennessee and Clemson and tell me that it wasn't all worth it. Because I tell you this, Gamecock Nation, there's not a Gamecock fan out there who wouldn't relive the first 10 weeks of the season if that meant the season finished the same way that it did. Nobody out there. Nobody out there that would not trade that. Absolutely. Hunter Kelly says, who are we playing in the simulation this weekend? So, Sunday night, we've got Vanderbilt. Monday night, Kentucky. Tuesday nights, we have Clemson. Let's see. Yeah, J.C. Sherbert, by the way, guys, did a great job of explaining NIL, the relationship between Carolina Rise, Garnet Trust, how they work together, Park Avenue, what's happening with that. So really, really good stuff. John Rice said this earlier. Dak will have his first 100-yard game, and Mark's going to tweet something comparing Dak's 100-yard games to Mike Davis or Marcus Lattimore's 100-yard games. I love it, John. I love it. Love that. Let's see. Keeping the questions rolling. Austin Gregory says, prediction, South Carolina leads the SEC in sacks coming out of week 1. Could happen. I mean, listen, offensive line's a major question mark for North Carolina. Huge question mark for North Carolina. So these two teams are very similar. That's what's so interesting. These two teams are very, very, very similar. Brennan M says, first play of the season, Rattler handoff to Joyner into a bomb to Juice. I mean, you never know. You never know. It very well could happen. And that's why I keep going back to, guys, there's not a player on South Carolina's roster heading into the season that I'm more fascinated by than Dakereon Joyner. When you just think about and factor in the fact this is a guy that fans have been clamoring for years. Get DK the football. Let's see what DK can do. Why isn't he touching the football more? That's not going to be an issue this year. Dakereon Joyner is going to have every opportunity to succeed. He's going to have every opportunity to make plays. He'll have every opportunity to have his best season ever in Garnet and Black, because we know by now he's going to be RB1 when South Carolina takes the field against UNC. He's going to get the first crack, the first opportunities to be that dude in the running back room. I am just so fascinated now that his skill set, it sounds like it is going to be utilized. He is going to be a focal point. How does Dakereon Joyner deliver? I'm very excited to see what happens with that. Robert Hastings says, who in your opinion is the breakout defensive lineman this year, including defensive ends? Breakout defensive lineman. That's a good question. I will go. I think Jatius Gear. I really do. I think he was a nice pickup from Syracuse. There's a reason I labeled him the best overall. The most approved. Because he's got this high ceiling. He's got this potential. You know what I mean? Like 3.5 sacks at Syracuse. I think he could realistically be a 6 or 7 sack guy. I think he has that potential, Robert. I will go with Gear being that breakout guy off the edge. I really believe so. We've talked about it a lot, though. There is a lot of pressure on Clayton White. There's no doubt. We talked about it this morning on Inside the Gamecocks about the pressures that surround Clayton White. And, Clayton White's a guy that so much of the focus has been on the offense over the last 2 seasons because the offense has been abysmal, right? Marcus Satterfield, his shortcomings, what he's doing and or not doing. There's pressure on Clayton White this year. There is significant pressure on Clayton White to succeed and that defense take the next step forward, especially when it comes to stopping the run. We've heard the excuse over the first 2 years of, the offense is just terrible and the defense is gassed and, that's why they're not stopping the run. And listen, sometimes that excuse makes sense. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that South Carolina's offense, as porous as they were, did not put the Gamecocks defensively in some bad positions. But there have been plenty of games where from the jump, when South Carolina's defense was still fresh early in a game, there have been plenty of instances where they have gotten gashed. Just run up and down the field, could not stop a freaking nosebleed. Improving against the run, improving the defense as a whole, because it hasn't been elite. It's been good, but at times it's been ugly. And so when you talk consistency, I think everybody's mind goes to the offensive side, being more consistent offensively. And certainly that's the main talking point, as it should be. But it's a big year for Clayton White, man. It's a big year for Clayton White, his defense, taking the next step. You've improved recruiting. You're improving your talent. It's time for that to show. And so I think there is significant pressure on Clayton White and that defense to be a strength for South Carolina this year. I don't think anybody has a misconception that, the days of old where you had defenses giving up 10 points per game is the reality. But South Carolina, again, Clayton White has been bailed out by Marcus Satterfield, and Marcus Satterfield not being very good. And so there hasn't been nearly the amount of pressure. Hadn't been nearly the amount of pressure on Clayton White that maybe there should have been. Either way, guys, again, 843-790-3377. That's 843-790-3377 here on this Thursday, August the 10th, 2023. Guys, appreciate you all. Thank you all so much for tuning in, truly, man. I cannot say thank you enough for your love, for your support. There are days, I'll say this, guys. I lead with perspective, with gratitude, but there are, we all have our days, right? And there are days, admittedly, even for me, that I'll come into the show and for whatever reason, just kind of feeling off or don't feel as excited as normal or, again, it's life. It happens. And you guys, honestly, your interaction, your engagement, your love, your support, it's really what drives us to be consistent and to keep going and be passionate. And, you guys fire me up and get me excited. And, I today is a prime example because I'll be honest with you. I don't know if you could tell early in the show, but I was, feeling a little bit off, a little bit just, I don't know, just exhausted of the preseason talk of the position unit previews even. And, as the show went on and the show continued, carried on, what have you, you guys are able to keep that spark going and that joy, excitement, happiness, if you will. So I really do genuinely appreciate it. And also, when you have fantastic guests such as Mark Ryan, JC Sherbert, and you have great conversation, how can you not be fired up about talking ball, talking sports? And I'm so ready for kickoff, man. Like I cannot express how ready I am for kickoff at this point. I really, truly so looking forward to it, man. I'm so excited to get in that Monday of South Carolina, North Carolina, and just start talking ball, man. And just start talking some ball. Heck, we're going to be talking some week 0 next week because, of course, yours truly, TDC, will be out of town that following week. So we'll talk some week 0 next week. Again, the position unit preview series will also continue as we talk Gamecocks, linebackers, DBs, and kickers and punters. Tomorrow we'll wrap up the defensive line as well. I'll talk my season will be successful if, and we will dive into the overall grade for the defensive line. Also, guys, really excited for this. We've got my good friend Brett Ciancia of Pick Six Previews on the show later tonight. We will run that interview. Won't be airing it live or anything. That conversation will drop probably the week that we're out of town. But tonight I will be going live with my good friend Dave Shoemate of Mach 10 Sports. We're jumping on his show tonight at 8:15. Really, really excited to talk with Dave. Really good stuff. And again, I did a convo with him that you'll also hear that convo the week that we're out of town. So you're going to be taken care of on the podcast side of things. And finally, guys, let me say this. Thank you so much for the love and the support on the podcast side of the business, because I'll tell you guys, just to give you some perspective, just to give you some real perspective, this time last year, we were sitting around, 45,000, 50,000 downloads in a month. Guys, over the last 30 days, we are at 88,483 total downloads. Our downloads are up 126% compared to the previous period. And it's wild to see what the numbers have done since the week of SEC Media Days and how big that was for us in really creating this positive momentum. And so I want to say thank you all so much to all of you who tune into the podcast. I mean, we're having 5,000 download days, man. It's It's truly a blessing. It's incredible. And again, I cannot say thank you enough. It's awesome. It's awesome. So we're primed for our biggest and best football season yet. Also, guys, I've got exciting news on the merch side of things. Hats should be hitting the store very, very soon. And I'll leave it at that. Guys, thank you all so much. Appreciate you all. Again, make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Click that bell icon so you get notifications of when we drop the podcast or when we drop, live video or any video content for that matter. Subscribe to the podcast. Hit that subscribe button, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast at The Spurs Up Show. You can find us. Guys, in the meantime, thank you all so much. Appreciate you all tuning in. Have a great rest of your Thursday, and we will talk to you all tomorrow.